switched off or switched on to airplane mode. Tracy, can you confirm SEDERUNT and apologies, please?
Thank you, Chairman. We've got 14 members present, and I have apologies from Councillor Fairbairn and Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks, Tracy. Ian?
Yeah, Councillors Drysdale and Gusty are running late, individually running late, not together.
Thank you for that. Members, are there any declarations of interest? Councillor McKee?
Item 7 and item 8, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lever?
Item 6, Chair. I'll withdraw from the Chamber on the grounds that I know one of the applicants now worked with his son for quite a number of years.
Thanks, Councillor Lever. Councillor McKee, can you confirm your reasons for declaration items 7 and 8?
Sorry, Chair. I know one of the objectors to site 7 and 8, item 8, the applicant contacted me and had a discussion about it, albeit I referred them to the planning and whatnot, but I've had discussions with them, so I'll leave the room for both of them.
Thank you. Any other declarations of interest? I have one which is maybe not a declaration of interest, but I have an appointment I can't avoid, so I intend to leave the meeting at 2 o'clock today if it's still ongoing, and Councillor Campbell will continue until the conclusion of the meeting. So in your hands, members, will we finish before or after 2 o'clock? We go into whoever has a phone, can we all ensure phones are off, please? On either silent or airplane mode. Can we confirm a minute of the previous meeting as a true record? Thank you. In that case, I will ask Clerk Tracy to read out the procedure to be followed today. Tracy, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The Planning Applications Committee will consider each application in turn as detailed on the agenda. The case officer or other appointed officer will make a short presentation addressing the determining issues accompanied by digital images. Any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported at this time. Members may ask questions of officers following the presentation on points of clarification. The Chairman has been provided with a list of eligible representatives who have registered to speak at this meeting within the period specified in Council policy. No other persons will be allowed to speak. The Chairman will individually invite those who have registered in advance to speak to make their presentation, after which they may be questioned by committee members. No questions may be asked of members. The order of eligible parties being heard will be as follows: third parties objecting to an application, third parties supporting an application, statutory consultees objecting to an application, elected members of Dumfries and Galloway Council who are not members of the Planning Applications Committee, and such members should withdraw from the committee chamber after making their presentation, applicants or their agents. Representatives have been placed in alphabetical order, and a copy of the public speaking list is available from the committee officer taking notes of our proceedings. Presentations will be strictly limited to 3 minutes per person, except for national and major developments, which by their very nature are more complex, where the time limit will be 5 minutes. The Chairman of the committee will ask you to come to a conclusion if you take too long. Representatives are encouraged to use the time allotted to clarify any points they consider material and address the determining issues. Certain matters are not normally material planning considerations and will not be taken into account by the Council when deciding on a planning application. Representatives should not raise any new matters without explaining why they were not raised earlier with the case officer. Please do not repeat what is in the report, as members will have already read the report. After all the representations have been heard, the meeting is then in formal session and no members of the public may address the committee from the public gallery. The Planning Applications Committee will then proceed to determine the application or, where appropriate, agree a recommendation to be made to full Council, who will determine the application.
Thanks, Tracy. We go into the first agenda item number 4. Land south of NETHERMILN, Old Carlisle Road, MOFFAT. Planning application for erection of craft distillery and visitor centre, formation of parking area and associated works. Case number 19/1657/4. The recommendation is to approve subject conditions, and the case officer today presenting the report is Robert Duncan. Robert, can you take us through your presentation, please? And Amy, can we close the curtains, please, so that we can view the slides? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to present today. Claire Eckstein, the case officer, is unfortunately absent today through illness. So as Claire's present team leader, it falls on me to present the slides today and the report in her absence. So what I will do first, there is an update on two matters since the report has been published, but I will cover that once I've presented the slide. So what you're looking at initially is allocation plan. This shows the southern part of MOFFAT itself. You can see the application site located just there, right next to Old Carlisle Road. It's on the western side and it would be accessed from Selkirk Road, which is A708. And that's about 300 metres to the north of the application site. This is a slightly closer view. You have the application site outlined on this one. It's extending to about 0.4 of a hectare, so 4,000 square metres. Moving to the aerial photograph of the site, you'll notice there have been a number of representations here, and there are residential properties in the vicinity. So the labelling should help with this. You can see south and north NETHERMILN, pair of semi-detached properties located there. To the north of that, that's number 11, Old Carlisle Road, also known as Fernlea. Rathlet is located towards the southeast with the workshop next to it. Dunscott Cottage is the property there, and Burnfoot is actually obscured slightly by the naming tag. It's just to give you an idea of where these properties lie in proximity. The application site is located within this area here. You can see the existing access to the site. You've got the boundary there with the properties at south and north NETHERMILN. These show existing site levels. You can see the boundary of the application site shown in red there. As has been noted in 1.9 of the report, which is on page 18, the adjacent land is located within the 1 in 200 year anticipated flood event area as modelled by Kaya Consulting, and that's one of the considerations in the case. Moving to the block plan, this is slightly faint, certainly fainter than the printout I've got, but it shows the general layout of the site as proposed. So you have the existing access point, which would be used as a proposed access point, a service road around the proposed distillery, and car parking spaces located within this area here. The distillery itself is obviously the building that's located there, so a single building on the application site is proposed. Moving on to the details of it, the proposed elevations are shown here. That would be the elevation as it would face broadly kind of north-northeast. So as you come down Old Carlisle Road, that would be the elevation that you would see prominently. The flip side is the rear elevation, so that would be facing broadly towards south-southwest, and you have the proposed side elevations. To give an idea of scale, and again this is covered in the report, the flue for the building would be about 14.33 metres in height at its highest point above ground level. The building itself would be nearly 20 metres in depth, and that's including the canopy, which you can see just located there, and about 25 metres across. This gives an indication it's obviously a proposed distillery, so this shows the location of apparatus within the building. I think the key thing to note is it's an internalised process the applicant has provided. There won't be any malting of barley on this site either. So what you're looking at is the layout of the distilling process in essence. Plus you have a visitor attraction as well within that building and some storage too. You've got the lorry there just to give again a scaling reference point. The next couple of slides are indicative, illustrative, three-dimensional images of what the property would look like. So it gives you an idea. Again, the predominantly glazed frontage would be facing Carlisle Road, so top elevation. would be what would face visitors as they came down Old Carlisle Road. Moving towards actual site pictures, these were taken by the case officer at the time of her site visit. The silver car gives a scaling point, that's our pool vehicle. So this is looking northwards, broadly kind of more north-northwest. It's a view of the site entrance, just the location the car is parked. The application site is on the left-hand side. You can see the properties here of North and South NETHERMILN, which are semi-detached. And you can see the boundary of their curtilage as well, and its proximity to the application site. This is looking more towards the application site itself. It gives you an idea of it's on the edge of the settlement. It's got a very open nature to it. That's panning left. As I said, part of this area is identified as being within the floodplain in the 1 in 200 year flood event. This is going back across Old Carlisle Road, so it's a close-up of the site entrance. You can see 30-mile-an-hour signs there as you come into MOFFAT, and the boundary fence with the property at South NETHERMILN that's located there. Again, the application site is on the left-hand side. This is panning round, site entrance, and your application site is located here. That's a view from the same position, and that's looking pretty much due southwest. You can see the location of the site on the edge of the settlement of MOFFAT. And that's looking pretty much due south. This is a position just obviously north of the site entrance, looking towards the application site. Panning left from that point, so this is actually on Old Carlisle Road. It's looking towards Dunscott Cottage, which you can see on the right-hand side is the property there. This is moving completely, so this is the existing site entrance you can see in the foreground, and it's looking towards South NETHERMILN, and you can see the boundary fence located there. This is looking more towards the northwest, and again, you can see the boundary corner of the residential property. And that's a close-up. That's the boundary fence with South NETHERMILN, so that shows the proximity to the application site. And that gives a further view towards number 11, Old Carlisle Road, and North and South NETHERMILN, which you can see just at the top of the image. This is a view actually taken from within the application site, so it's looking back towards, I can get the pointer to work, looking towards the pool vehicle car, so that's the site entrance. You can see North and South NETHERMILN on the left and right hand side. And you have the properties here, which I mentioned before, just beyond the bridge. Panning left from the same point, you've got the northwest application site corner. You've got the gap through the field next to NETHERMILN Meadow, which I think is number 11 Old Carlisle Road. And then you've got the property of South NETHERMILN on the right-hand side there. And that's just a view showing the nature of the surroundings, panning left from within the application site. And again, panning left, so this is more towards the west. And again, by this point, you've almost rotated all the way around, so you're looking towards Dunscott Cottage in the centre and Rathpit and its associated workshop on the left-hand side. So this is more looking towards the east from within the site. The two key points I had mentioned since the report was published. Firstly, we have received further comments from the applicant relating to proposed condition 1, which appears in your papers as part of the recommendation on page 30. And the concern is that condition would be unduly restrictive as it has been worded relative to operations. Now, I know that the applicant is due to speak today, so he may be better placed to explain to you what his concern with the wording is. We also have a consultation response from SEPA. Now, if you look at section 2.5 of the report on page 20, we did advise that we would communicate it verbally. We did get a response from SEPA 2 days ago, 27th of January. It's been published on our website for the public to see, and SEPA have no objection to this planning application, and they've commented on flood risk as well as regulatory requirements in respect of the business. So I'm pleased to report that that is not a concern. We don't have that objection from a statutory consultee. Turning back to the report, the case officer has gone through a range of issues. You'll note in section 3 there have been a number of representations. They are summarised in pages 20 to 25. They include objection as well as support, and they've been considered in some detail. The report itself goes through a whole range of issues and looks at that and tries to draw an overall conclusion. So you're looking at things like principles, siting and design, lighting, access and servicing, location of development and accessibility, flooding, odours and noise, impact of wildlife, landscaping, other matters, and the use of the building as a distillery. The case officer spent time to look at all of those issues quite carefully. As you can see on pages 30 to 33 of your papers, the recommendation is to approve subject to the conditions listed, and there are 15 of those. I'm happy to answer any members' questions at this stage or provide points of clarification.
Thanks, Robert. At this stage, members' questions for the case officer. Ivor?
Just with regard to, I think it was the first condition, there'll be no bonded warehouse, yet in the Council Road Officers consultation at E, there is no vehicles to remove the whisky. There's just 4 deliveries of malt barley and 8 collections for waste products monthly. Is the whisky or product to be retained on site, or is there more movements of vehicles per month?
Robert?
Okay, my understanding from speaking to the applicant after the report was published about condition 1, and again the applicant's better placed to explain this because he better understands the distilling process and all the terminology, but essentially there are, when the condition talks about distilled produce, there's a difficulty there because it's not differentiating between stuff that's maturing in casks and, for example, a bottled product for sale. So, if I recall correctly, there were 3 main strands to the operation. There's the distilling of whisky on site. Now, a certain number of casks would be stored within the building prior to uplift and being taken away by lorries. There would also be casks used that would, some of those would be imported. I think the majority would be imported for blending into a whisky product. And the third thing you would have on site that would be distilled produce would actually be a sealed or a bottled product. And that would obviously be part of the offer for visitors to the site. If you had tourists going around the site and things like that, they would use that to buy souvenirs. So the concern with the first condition was it would be unduly restrictive if it was just limited to distilled produce. Insofar as the bonded warehousing issue goes, we're going on the basis of the information submitted by the applicant. So the supporting information that's been submitted, and we're going on the basis that there won't be any bonded warehousing on site. Yes, there is an element of storage of distilled produce there, but not bonded warehousing.
And I'm sure that will be the subject of a discussion when we get to considering the application in detail when we're in session. But Ivor, you want to come back?
So how many actual vehicle movements are there? Because it says there's only 4 malted barley loads coming in. Are we actually getting whisky coming in that's going to be blended as well? So is there more? You know, have we actually based these figures on the true vehicle movements?
I would hope we'd be basing it on information we've received from the applicant, but Robert's trying to find that for us. We will have the opportunity, if Robert doesn't have that information to hand, to ask the applicant or agent, because the applicant's present. Hey, Robert. Hey, David.
Certainly my understanding is yes, by definition there would have to be more movement than are just mentioned there specifically by the roads engineers, because there isn't a bonded warehouse on site. Therefore, yes, they would need to take the produced distilled whisky off site to a bonded warehouse elsewhere. So yes, they're implicit there would have to be other movements than just mentioned.
Thanks, Ivor. Jeff?
It's just a general query on 3.2.10 on the top of page 23 makes reference to the impact on wildlife. Is SNH no longer a statutory consultee, although I appreciate the name may have changed, I'm not quite sure.
Robert?
The present SNH service level statement, which sets out when they would expect to be consulted in applications for an application of this nature and scale, they would not expect to be consulted. It's not an unduly sensitive area, it's not designated, for example, on wildlife grounds, so they don't seek consultation on these types of applications, no.
Thanks, Robert. Ian?
Thank you. Just because it's been raised, so when Robert mentioned earlier at page 30, condition 1, and Ivor's already touched on it, when I read through that, when I got to the bottom, for by it carries on to page 31, but it's particularly what it says in brackets, including any purpose in class 1, 4 and 6. I thought that would have been a moot point, but just asking, I would imagine we'll get to that point when the applicant comes forward. That would allow, so if it's as restrictive as proposed with the conditions, that would prohibit any further traffic use, but I would imagine that's something that's looked to be expanded on. Just to get an understanding if that's the case, and if it is, I'll ask the applicant themselves when they come to speak to you.
Yeah, I'm hoping the applicant will be able to enlighten us somewhat, and Roberts will remain here, but the condition 1 will be discussed because there are clear issues about condition 1. Any other questions at this stage for the case officer? Okay, in that case, we come to the first of the registered speakers, and I can just remind folks that we have a large agenda today. We have a number of registered speakers, so I will ask you to be very conscious of the fact that each speaker will be allocated 3 minutes and 30 seconds to go. I will remind that speaker to wind up their presentation, and at the same time, if they would be kind enough to wait in case members have questions for them, I'd be grateful. So the first speaker is Arthur Milton. Arthur, just whenever you're ready, and you will have 3 minutes, and I will remind you 30 seconds to go to draw your presentation to a conclusion. So whenever you're ready, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. The concern I have concerns the road, Old Carlisle Road. It's really a residential road, and recent additional housing already has caused increased traffic. The road is narrow. The road is two-way from the days when people drove around in Morris Minors, but given the width of vehicles nowadays, 2 vehicles meeting can hardly pass each other without one of them having to stop. And certainly any vehicles parked on the road causes an obstruction. The footpath or pavement on Old Carlisle Road is narrow, and in places there is actually no footpath. In some places it's simply a muddy verge. People using the Southern Upland Way, hikers and walkers, come into Moffat and exit Moffat through Old Carlisle Road. So there is quite a bit of pedestrian traffic on the road, particularly in the spring and summer. There are also some farm vehicles that are slow moving and using Old Carlisle Road. Turning in and out of properties will be more difficult with the increased traffic, both during the construction phase and once the distillery is operational, if it came about. And at the junction of Old Carlisle Road and the Selkirk Road, the houses numbers 1 to 7 are terraced houses which have no front gardens. The houses are adjacent to the pavement at that point, so the houses are very close to the traffic on Old Carlisle Road at that important corner. Some of these residents park on the street, which makes Old Carlisle Road at that junction with the Selkirk Road virtually single track at that important junction. Now obviously visitors coming by coach or minibus is going to cause a bit of congestion, particularly at that junction, as well as in other parts of Old Carlisle Road because of the issues I've mentioned, and particularly, of course, during the construction phase, if there were lorries and other construction vehicles turning into Old Carlisle Road, then one can see quite a bit of difficulty with traffic.
You have 30 seconds to go, Arthur. 30 seconds remaining,
Right.
and then I'll ask you to draw your
That brings
presentation.
my contribution to a close. These were the points I was wanting to make. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, and thanks for being so concise. Do members have any questions for Arthur? John McKee?
I just wonder, what's your view? I see there's houses on both sides of the road. So construction of passing places along there would be very difficult. Or do you see that as being something that can be done?
The acoustics are not very good at this end, so I didn't catch everything you said. Something about passing places?
Yes, do you see the construction of passing places on that part of the road as being possible or not?
Are they what or not?
Could we construct passing places
Oh, could they construct
on that
them?
road?
I doubt it. The verge where it exists is not wide enough to construct passing places.
I think that would be with the control of the applicant anyway. Ivor?
Thank you. Mr. Milton, you sort of suggest that the traffic movements would be difficult. The road's not up to standard yet. Our council's roads officer has not mentioned anything in here with regard to issues of road safety. You also mentioned you've got agricultural vehicles. Well, some of these agricultural vehicles are as big as Arctic lorries now. Why would this development actually, you could add considerable more traffic to the road? You could have a farm further down the road being turned into a dairy, and you could have an Arctic twice a day going in. So, and you wouldn't have planning permission there. Why do you think this development will be specific to road safety and issues of access and egress?
Because of the increased number of vehicles owing to the number of people coming to the distillery either as visitors or for customs and excise people or delivering goods, and of course in the construction phase, I see that this will increase the scale of the usage of the road very considerably. Thanks.
Any other questions for Mr. Milton? In that case, sir, thank you very much for your presentation. If you'd like to resume your seat, we'll have the next speaker. Thank you, sir. Okay, the next speaker is Donald Gillespie. Donald, if you'd like to come forward, please. Again, Donald, just when you're ready, and we will remind you with 30 seconds to go to draw your presentation to a conclusion. Thank you, just whenever you're ready, sir.
Thank you. My name is Donald Gillespie, but I'm not here to speak just for myself. I happen to be on the management committee of the Proudfoot Indoor Sports and Social Club, which is the largest and oldest club in Moffat, with a membership of around about 300 or 400 annually, plus countless hundreds more of people who come and regularly use the building. We're home to the Moffat Rugby Club, the Karate Club, the Snooker Club, the Table Tennis Club, Moffat Country Dancing. The list goes on and on. So we see a lot of people coming through the door. We have social events and we have a bar. Now I can assure you that one of the key topics of discussion in the Proudfoot over the last year has been the thrilling idea that Moffat should get a distillery. Now, it's been debated on many an occasion, and I can assure you, and this is why I'm here, because I was asked to do this by members, I can assure you that the overwhelming view of this cross-section, the best cross-section you could get of the Moffat community, is in favour of having a distillery. They think the town needs this additional boost to keep its attraction. We've suffered a few problems over the last 6 months, really, with the closure of a few hotels, including Moffat House. We don't want the town to decline. Any little thing of this nature will enhance its attraction. and hopefully keep the town vibrant again. And I think if you wanted a cross-section survey, you couldn't get better than the opinion that comes out of that club, because it does serve so many types and groups of people of all sexes, all ages, and all activity users. So that's all I'm here to say, that the cross-section of people in Moffat that we come across are overwhelmingly in favour and desirable of having a new distillery in the town. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Gillespie. Thanks for being so brief. Do anyone have any questions for Mr Gillespie? In that case, sir, thank you very much for coming forward. The next person we have speaking is Les Geddes. If you'd like to come forward, please. And again, 3 minutes, and I'll remind you 30 seconds to go to draw your presentation to a conclusion. And sir, whenever you're ready, thank you.
Okay. Is the microphone? Yes, it's on. Thank you very much. I have a stammer, incidentally, so if there's anything I say which is indistinct, please inform me, and I will try it again. I'm a member of our community council, and part of the job we do is to attend meetings of the Federation of the other community councils. And everyone explains all the things they're up to and how the achievements in their own communities and things. And it is awful in a way, because there are so many small towns, small villages that are just shriveling up at the moment. They don't have anything happening. They can't bring anyone new into the town, and they're shriveling up. And so I'm proud of all the efforts that people in our town, almost all of whom are volunteers, and they haven't a vested interest, are trying to do in order to bring more life into our town. I have an English accent, but I have been in the town for 70 years, my family for 300 years. And it's been important to me, ever since I have returned to the town, to make sure that we gently improve it. The older people still come, but we need to bring in younger people. It's important too, because if the application for the distillery is agreed, that will be news. It will be news in terms of the fact that somebody has decided to spend a great deal of money and have official support in order to make significant investment in the town. And that is desperately important to us, because it will encourage others to think that this is a town that is growing and is on the up. And as I said, that's increasingly hard for small towns in the south of Scotland at the moment. It appears to me that the applicant has been tireless in his efforts to consult our community. And I have to say, in agreement with the previous speaker, the vast majority of the people in the town are in absolute support of the application.
You have 30 seconds to go, sir.
I'll stop here then, if that's okay with you, sir.
That's very generous of you. Thank you very much. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Geddes? Ivor?
Both yourself and the previous speaker, keen on the actual idea of a distillery for Moffat. But is this the right site? Because we're here to look at the actual distillery, and we've had roads issues, and if I heard you correctly, you remember the community council, and as that community councils that I go to in my area, they have roads issues. Do you think this road is capable of actually taking the amount of vehicles that will be required?
Okay, all the indications are that this, in the description, is described as a craft distillery. It isn't a huge thing, it's a small thing, it's a craft thing. And I can't see that the traffic on the road is severe at the moment. I accept there's parking problems here and there and this, that and the other, but we are entirely accustomed to that. It's an agricultural area, and I have to say also that the proposed distillery is actually outside the boundary of the town. And that is important because at the same time that there's an application in now for 73 houses to be constructed in our town that are ugly and are actually within the boundaries of the town. And it's awfully hard for us to complain against all of that. So here's this tiny thing that is important for the future of our town, our community, that is not holding up anyone at all, and I completely support it. It's a great hope for us and our future as a small town in Scotland.
Archie?
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Geddes. Just a point of clarity more than anything else that you said. You said you were a member of the Community Council.
I am.
The Community Council is statutory consultee with regards to the planning process.
Yes.
Are you saying that the Community Council are in favour of this application?
The issue of that has been brought up, and apparently, according to the newly introduced scheme, a Community Council isn't able to support anything officially. It seems ridiculous to me. However, it is the truth of the thing. But I would say I think everyone on the Community Council is in support of the application because they're interested in the future of the town. You know, you have to see that.
Pauline?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Geddes, for your presentation. As a resident of Moffat, could you possibly confirm with myself and the group that the pathway at the moment for walkers and hikers and people potentially visiting the distillery, if it goes through, do walkers have to actually walk on the road, or is it a grass bird that they utilise at the moment? Thank you.
They would have to walk on the road in the majority of cases, but for the majority of the journey, actually, from the join with the Selkirk Road, there is a pavement the whole way along there. It kind of fizzles out before the end of the boundary of the town and the agricultural area.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Pauline. Any other members? In that case, Mr. Geddes, thank you very much for your presentation. Great
Thank
to
you.
resume your seat. We now come to the applicant, Nick Bullard. If Nick's with us, Nick, I'd ask you to focus on your presentation. You only have 3 minutes, and I'll remind you with 30 seconds to go to bring your presentation to a conclusion.
With your permission, I'd like to speak instead. My name's Gareth Roberts. I'm the agent. Is that acceptable to the committee?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Fantastic.
Just bear in mind, you
3
collectively have 3 minutes, and I'll remind you with 30 seconds to go.
Thank you. All right, well, thanks for the opportunity to speak to the committee today. Nick is the applicant. He's a local resident, and he's the owner of Dark Sky Spirits Limited, which produces a well-regarded blended whisky that's been on the market recently called the MOFFAT. The proposed distillery will use Mr. Bullard's expertise to create barley spirit in small quantities for laying down to become whisky. Cask will be matured off-site, save for a small number of working barrels, and I'll address condition 1 at the end of this, if that's okay. The proposed distillery will allow the existing local business to diversify. It will create numerous jobs in an industry which is one of the UK's most successful food and drink exports. These jobs will be well paid and they will be highly trained. The revenue generated by distilleries does find its way into the local economy. A recent report found that every distillery supports around about 60 to 70 spin-off jobs in everything from local B&Bs to transport companies and so on. There won't be a cafe in the building. It will support and not compete with other local businesses. Visitors in general are projected to be modest in number, and yet they are relatively high-spending visitors, and statistically, visitors to distilleries are likely to come from overseas. Should this application be approved, Moffat will join Annandale and Borders on a Borders Whisky Trail. The proposed building is similar in scale to nearby light industrial and farm buildings in the area. I think that perhaps didn't come across in the photographs, but beyond the site, if you like, when you're coming out of Moffat, if you continue down on both sides of the road, there's quite industrial farmland, and what we're proposing is something which is, I would say, smaller in some cases than existing buildings. Whisky making involves only 3 ingredients, famously barley, yeast and water. Spirit tanks are bunded and the process is closed. Such buildings happily coexist with towns and villages throughout Scotland. Indeed, they are many of the most atmospheric of all rural buildings. So in summary, this building will add to the variety and character of Moffat, and as the previous speaker said, it'll give another reason for visitors to come to the town. That's the end of my talk, but can I just address condition 1 in a bit more detail, because I think it was a correct point that there was some deficiencies in the statement. Just to give you an idea of the scale of the production, the applicant is currently, it's a genuine micro distillery, and the applicant has currently blended 5 barrels of whisky. The production is proposed to be 1 barrel of whisky a day. So it is correct. There was a deficiency in the application document that didn't talk about spirit being exported from the site, taken away. But we would project that there would be 1 truck per month, which, when compared to the agricultural traffic around, is negligible, I would think. And regarding the exact wording of condition 1, it does seem to be restrictive to the functioning of a distillery, because it talks about there being no spirit storage. But of course, there'll need to be spirit stored in bottle for sale to visitors, and also a small number of working casks and spirit in tanks. So if it were possible to look at a revision to condition 1, we might propose that there's a number, say, a limit of 100 casks, if approved, which would be the working spirit on site.
Thanks very much, and I'm grateful to you for that clarity. Members, if you have questions, but we will ask David to help us with a revision of condition 1 that will support the applicant, or at least it will give the applicant comfort that should we support the application, that particular concern is raised will be dealt with. So happy to have you ask the applicant any questions, but we'll deal with condition 1 when we're in session. Any questions for the applicant or his agent? Ivor?
Chair, just to clarify one thing, there will be no aging of the spirit on site, but there will be spirit taken to the site for blending purposes, so it'll be aged off-site. I think that was one of the concerns with regard to black mould or something.
There'll be no warehousing on site. There'll be a number of casks which are stored just to be filled on site, and that's why I say perhaps a number, a maximum of 100, but there will be no black mould danger.
Thanks, Ivor. Any other questions? I've got Archie, Jane, Jim McComb and John Young.
Thanks very much. You mentioned it'd be 1 barrel of whisky per day produced within the microbrewery, and you want to limit to 100 the barrels that you say in condition number 1. If it's 1 barrel per day and you say 1 vehicle movement per month to take that away, I'm just wondering why 100, because that would be over 300 barrels a year.
We're trying to come to a logical small number. The casks actually come, believe it or not, they come from the States or from Spain, complete. You would have thought they'd travel as staves and be built up, but they come complete. So you get a truckload, so the truck might be 50 or so. So you do have to buy them in number to make financial sense.
Jane Maitland.
Thanks. Looking at the proposal and thinking about why you've chosen this particular place as opposed to any other, could you just tell us why you've selected here as opposed to anywhere else in the town?
You might know that we submitted an application which was withdrawn for the old garage, a stone-built garage in the hydro area of Moffat, and it was deemed to be difficult to access and just too small to function in a more residential area. That application was withdrawn, and then a site finding exercise was carried out, and this is it's an attractive site, it's easy to access, it is out with the site, the town boundary, but it's on the boundary of the town, so it is within walking distance of the town. I think it's one of the few available sites on the market in recent times. So there's commercial considerations as well.
Thanks, Jane. Jim McComb.
You mentioned the one lorry movement per month to remove the product.
Yes.
Is that the distilled product
Yes.
from the site?
Yes.
Well, what about the blended product? What about the movements associated with it?
Well, I think it's fair to say that they're very small. If the business has been going for a year, there's been 5 casks used so far. We're talking about bottled product, which would go out in the back of a car or a van almost. So the scale of the blending is very, very small indeed. It's just to clarify that there is no intention to have warehousing and storage on the site. That's imperative.
So the scale you're talking about could be removed by van rather than lorry?
For the blended product, I'm certain that's the case. Is that the case, Nick?
Yeah. I mean,
Mr.
so if I can just jump in, I think what your question was about incoming liquid for blending. Is that correct?
Both incoming
and outgoing. Okay. So what happens is that at the moment we've blended 5 casks. So the 5 casks would come in that scenario. We'd blend them up. We'd bottle them and send them out. The way that they would get sent out is probably this isn't going to go up to Glasgow for export, because anything that we do of that scale is going to be done up in Houston, where we do our blending at the moment. So this is going to be very, very small scale for local distribution. I mean, it's minuscule. But there is a minimum number of casks that have to be on site to do that blending. We can't have half a cask, obviously. So you bring 5 casks in and do the blending. So that 100 casks that we're talking about is incoming the 5 casks, as well as what we produce that we're going to batch up to put on the back of the truck.
Thanks, Jim. John Young.
Thank you, Chair. Will the bottling process be carried out on site, or will the bottling take place elsewhere?
There's some hand bottling on site, certainly, but not a big bottling line. It's a small-scale operation.
Thanks, John. Any other members' questions? In that case, gentlemen, thank you for your time. Thank you for your presentation. Members, we're now in session, and when we sort out the rest of the questions, we'll then go to David and Robert, who will try and help us with the condition 1. Ian Blake.
Thank you, Chairman. It was actually a comment from Mr. Geddes. I would like David's opinion on it. Obviously it refers to it's referred to in this report, but in any planning matter it would is the opportunity of a community council to either support or reject an application. I think we need some clarity in that.
I think I have a community council who sometimes decide not to make representation because not 100% of the people are in favour or against, so that they decide not to respond at all. But David will maybe help us.
Yes, I'm glad you raised that, because catching Robert's eye, that was complete news to the pair of us. I've no idea where this edict has come from, because in planning terms, they're a statutory consultee, so we would expect a community council to represent their communities. And it's certainly not a planning thing that we've said people can't make comments on it. Whether it's come from anywhere else, I have no idea. But we would, as a planning authority, happily accept letters of objection and support from community council as a statutory consultee. So that does surprise me. I will try and find out some more on that.
That won't affect any decision or consideration we have today. So apart from condition 1, is there anything else that members have a question about? Okay, David, can you and Robert collectively maybe help us with... Oh, Henry, sorry.
Sorry, Chair, I was trying to get your attention there. It was just the consideration behind condition 15 and the operating hours of 9 o'clock to 1700. I was just wondering if that was perhaps a bit restrictive.
Maybe David will just encompass that in the whole debate about, or Robert, about condition 1, how you can help us and respond to Henry, because clearly we don't want to put so many restrictions on a business that it's not practical and able to function properly. So, Robert, can you help us with that?
Condition 15 was simply in recognition of the fact this is right next to residential properties. There will be some visitors there will be some comings and goings. Equally, we recognise that distillery is not the kind of business that operates 9 to 5. So the condition is to try and restrict it being open to visiting members of the public, basically to try and protect residential amenity nearby. So you haven't got, for example, the extra vehicle movements you would associate with visitor numbers. You wouldn't have the chatter, the noise of them exiting vehicles and entering the distillery. It was simply to try and preserve residential amenity there.
I think it's in our gift, of course, Henry's gift, to propose an amended set of times that members would determine eventually whether or no we'd want to see the opportunity for the business to expand beyond 5 o'clock at night or 9 in the morning. That's something that we would decide. Before we go to condition 1, Pauline has a question or an observation.
Thank you, Chair. Robert, I hope you don't mind me asking, in the conditions I note that there doesn't seem to be anything about the access for walkers on foot or people using the Southern Upland Way. Are you, as planners, because I haven't been on that site, quite happy that it is quite safe? It may be in condition 9 or 10, but if you, and 11, but I'm not sure exactly what that's telling me there. If you could just clarify, I'd be grateful. Thanks.
That's absolutely fine. We got a response from the Council Roads Planning Team Leader on the 30th of October last year. Now, that's pretty much verbatim in your report, what it says at 2.2. So that covers it. There's also a list of recommended conditions that they had suggested, and we've taken all of those conditions forward and put them in the report. So there wasn't anything additional about footpaths or so on that they wanted to see implemented.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Ian.
Just a small point in regards to what Councillor McClellan's brought up. Is there an opportunity to get a retrospective understanding of what the applicant thoughts are in condition 15?
Well, Robert, David will come in because we're too late to ask the applicant now.
We did actually have discussions between the applicant and ourselves about both condition 15 and condition 1. Just to say at the outset, neither condition were put forward by ourselves with any intention of trying to restrict the ability of the business to operate. Quite the opposite. What we have in condition 15, and when it's been explained, if you actually look at the precise wording of it, it shall not be open to visiting members of the public. So it doesn't say that the operations can't take place, people working there can't carry on work. What it's really just saying is it's the visiting element is what we were trying to put there, but then it carries on unless otherwise agreed in writing with the Council's Planning Authority. So that does give us some ability to accept minor variations to that. If there was a wholesale variation to that, for example, they wanted to have it open to the members of the public from 7 in the morning till 11 at night, you know, that is something which is material. It's not what the members of the public have been aware of, and I think that would require Section 42 application. But certainly, if it's an occasional change or a reasonable change, we'd be quite happy to agree that in writing. And we've, on that basis, my understanding is the applicant was content with that one. However, condition 1 was something that, again, it was perhaps lack of awareness on our part of the detailed operation of a distillery that meant that what we were trying to do there was say it didn't have a bonded warehouse as part of it. And we took, I think, it came from their own wording in the design and access statement, but it's the other storage of distilled produce within the proposed building that is the key problem. And certainly, Robert and I have had a discussion on this, and we're quite comfortable with amending that because it wasn't our intention to unduly restrict the operations of it. And when it's been explained to us, I think we can find an amended wording which would satisfy both parties on that.
Thanks, Ian. If members are content, we could, which is maybe unusual, we could have David or Robert provide a form of words that we might be happy to agree to. Either that or members just bring forward their suggestions. David, Robert, do you have a form of words that might address the concerns of the applicant given the wording we have currently, and see whether members are like that, and then we can then go through the conditions if there are any other changes that members might want to make?
The suggestion that's been put to me, and I don't have any great difficulty with this, if we feel it's reasonable, and the discussion today has helped that because there's a greater understanding about the 100 filled cask. If you look at the present condition 1, pages 30-31, the element within that where it says there shall be no bonded warehousing or other storage of distilled produce within the proposed building is creating difficulty for the applicant, or it would do if you're minded to grant permission. So the suggestion is to take that part out of it and replace it with the following wording: there shall be no more than 100 filled casks within the proposed building in duty suspension at any one time. So that's basically, if you like, the working element of the distillery, and it's not bonded warehousing. So it's basically substituting one element of phraseology within that condition with another. So like I say, where it says at the moment there shall be no bonded warehousing or other storage of distilled produce within the proposed building, suggestion is that's replaced with there shall be no more than 100 filled casks within the proposed building in duty suspension at any one time.
Thanks, Robert. So when we come to making a decision, whether that be to support or refuse the application, I'll ask Tracy to read out the amended condition 1. There's an issue about condition 15 that Henry raised and Ian raised as well. Given the assurances that David have given us that this is not to restrict the working but the visiting hours of the unit, are members comfortable to leave it as it is, or do we have alternative proposals? Ivor?
Chair, what consideration was given to deliveries out with those hours? Because I'm thinking, I'm not just 100% sure how you actually deliver malted barley, but if it's like dry barley, is it blown into a silo, which can be a noise nuisance? And some of these lorries, depends on the age of them, can be really quite noisy when they're revved up to blow barley into a silo. Or is it tipped, which would be 10 minutes, just reverse in? Because, you know, if you're sitting with a lorry blowing for half an hour at 2 o'clock in the morning, I don't think that would be very good for residents next door.
I'm sure if you have a proposal to include deliveries as well, members will take that on board, and if Robert doesn't have any information for us, we can discuss that at the end of the session.
Chair, the information I've got, and this was going to come back to the earlier question, I think it was clarified when the applicant spoke, but the design statement of 15th of October that Organic Architects produced in relation to this, at section 6.0 of that, on page 12 of that statement, it says in relation to the deliveries at this scale, there will be 4 deliveries of malted barley monthly. It talks about waste product as well coming out the way, and waste products will require 8 collections monthly. It's not specific about deliveries, you know, beyond them actually taking place, how it would actually happen. I would imagine the elevation showed silos, so I'm assuming that the malted barley would be taken onto site in a kind of covered wagon and then emptied into the silo or blown up into the silo and then held there. But that's an assumption on my part. We don't know. You could, if members were minded, you could easily adapt the wording of condition 15 to include deliveries, because again, you wouldn't want a delivery during antisocial hours down a primarily residential street. That would concern me as well, you know, for the same reason, for the reason of trying to protect residential amenity from noisy operations.
So we'll deal with that when we come to the different conditions. Ivor, I think Ian wanted to speak. Are you happy now?
No, I was just going to say, I suppose, because we're in session, that I am actually supportive of this application after hearing what's been said. The only point, it's completely void within the report with regards to potential passing places, but I don't think they're needed, taking into consideration what we've heard. Councillor McKee brought them up, maybe the constraints. I do know that area fairly well. I cycle around there on occasion, and it's the level of traffic generation what's being implied. The flexibility around about condition 15 I'm satisfied with, and if that was felt inadequate by the applicant at section 42, as we've been advised, could actually be applied for, and I think once we get condition 1. So I am supportive of it after hearing everything what's been said.
Okay, so we'll tidy up the 2 conditions and then we'll go into session. I'll ask members to make recommendations. Condition 1, Tracy. We'll do condition 15 first. Henry, are you now satisfied with the explanation David's given and what the opportunities for the applicant are, or do you want to make changes?
No, I fully understand the section 42 process. I just believe that by putting a a time limit on there of 1700, you're altering the potential for the nighttime economy, and that's why I was asking about the potential for this to be restrictive. I still feel that there's potential there for those hours to be a little bit later. It's in the locale of a farming community. Farmer vehicles will be working well into the evening, and I would have thought that evening visitations to the facility would be most welcome to the economy and area.
I presume we could, if members are inclined, increase the hours, because it would then not be a requirement for the applicant to use these hours, simply to have these hours available should his business develop to such a degree that they want to take advantage of that. Or we can leave it and have the applicant come back to the planning department if they see a need. So, Jane?
Well, I'm with you on that one, Chairman. It's quite clear that unless otherwise agreed in writing with the Council as planning authority, it's there as an opportunity to come back. So I'm quite satisfied to leave it as it is.
Henry?
Yeah, I can go with it. It just means a section 42, so I can go with that.
Thank you. So we come to, Ivor?
Chair, on the other point about deliveries, see, I would have concerns if you've got a lorry in there for half an hour blowing barley into a metal silo. Could we limit deliveries between 10 o'clock at night and 6 a.m. in the morning?
Oh, I think that'd be very reasonable if we choose to do that. And if you want to propose that and other members agree, then that would be fine. I think Robert did say it would be tied in, I think, more or less, by virtue of the fact that working hours would suggest that that's when the deliveries would come. But no, by all means, if that's what you and members want to introduce, that's fine. Robert, do you just clarify what Ivor's asking?
It's absolutely fine, Chair, just as you said. Yeah. The point I was making earlier was if you wanted to include deliveries as part of condition 15, you could easily do that, but you could equally set up a separate condition, similar to condition 15 for deliveries.
So
and
do
the
you
hours
want...
are obviously at your own discretion, whatever you feel is reasonable.
Yeah, so do you want to put forward a suggestion to members, and if members don't agree, then we'll have a vote on that before we go to the vote per se, on deliveries alone?
Well, I would move that it was between, no deliveries between, would it be 2200 hours and 0600 hours any day, just so that there's no interference in the evening, well, the night time.
Our members generally agreed with that. So I'll have Tracy confirm that the new wording for condition 1, the new wording for condition 16, and then I'll ask for proposals. Tracy, can you do that for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. So amendment to condition 1 is just the last 3 sentences to be replaced by, furthermore, there shall be no more than 100 filled casks within the proposed building due to suspension for the lifetime of the development. And an additional condition 16 that there will be no deliveries between 2200 hours and 0600 hours, unless otherwise agreed with the planning authority.
Members content with that? So that now, David, you want to...
Just a minor semantic point. The normal way of wording that is saying no deliveries between whatever you're saying, 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. the following day, just so it's very clear. But
thanks for that. Okay. Right, now that you have the conditions set, I'm looking for proposals. Councillor Dryborough.
Chair, with those amendments, I would move the application going forward.
Is that a unanimous decision of the committee? Thank you, members. Tracy, can you confirm the decision of the committee, please?
Yes, members have approved the application subject to the conditions with the amendment to condition 1 and the additional condition 16.
Thank you, Tracy. We come to agenda item number 5. GILCHRISTLAND Store, CLOSEBURN, Thornhill. Planning application for change of use of agricultural building to industrial building class 5. Application number 19/1492/full. There's a full application, recommendations to approve subject conditions, and the case officer is Lindsay Cameron. Lindsay, good morning. Would you like to take us through your presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. The application site is located at GILCHRISTLAND, which lies approximately 2.6 kilometres east of CLOSEBURN and the A76. It's located off the C6N public road, which extends from the A76 just south of CLOSEBURN through Crowell Chapel to Loch Ettrick and beyond. The site is accessed via private track, which also serves GILCHRISTLAND Farm and 3 and 4 GILCHRISTLAND cottages. The proposed site plan shows the existing building and the extent of the site in relation to adjacent buildings and dwellings. 3 and 4 GILCHRISTLAND cottages lies to the northeast, and farm and domestic outbuildings associated with GILCHRISTLAND Farm lie to the southwest. And the 2 other agricultural buildings, also under the control of the applicant, are to the southeast, outlined in blue. The plan also shows the proposed accessing of the site by an LGV and the proposed car parking areas. This slide shows the elevations and the floor plan for the building, which largely remain unchanged. Moving on to the photographs, this first photograph has been taken from the public roads looking in a southwesterly direction along the access track serving GILCHRISTLAND. Moving into the site, this photograph shows the existing building together with a concrete yard area which lies to the front and the side of the building. GILCHRISTLAND Farmhouse, which is in separate ownership, can be seen over the evergreen hedge. Panning left, the agricultural buildings, also under the control of the applicant, can be seen to the left of the photograph, and GILCHRISTLAND Farm and its outbuildings can again be seen beyond the hedge and the gate. Moving to a position just out with the southern corner of the site, this is a view over the southwest boundary and shows the nature of the outbuildings at GILCHRISTLAND, which include a mix of domestic and agricultural buildings. From the same position, turning to look back across the application site, it just about shows the full extent of the site, the building and its concrete yard areas. Panning right, this photograph shows the building in relation to 3 and 4 GILCHRISTLAND cottages and also shows the access track which would serve the development. Moving to a position to the rear of the site, this photograph looks in a southeasterly direction across the site boundary with GILCHRISTLAND. On this final slide is a view across the rear of the building. So subject to the conditions set out in the report, it was considered that the proposals would comply with the relevant development plan policies and therefore it's recommended for approval.
Thank you, Lindsay. Members, any questions for the case officer? John McKee.
I'm up to the same thing again, Chair. Access is very restricted on that 2.6 kilometres of road. Do you propose getting passing places built in? Or what's your view on what can be done about it?
Lindsay?
No passing places are proposed due to the existing established use and also the scale and the nature of the proposed use. It was felt that it wasn't necessary to provide passing places. The response from the Council's Roads Officer on page 39 also confirmed that they had no objections to the proposal and didn't seek the provision of passing places.
Thanks, Councillor McKee. Any other members' questions for the case officer? In that case, we have a number of speakers listed again. And I'll just remind everyone again, it's 3 minutes to speak and 30 minutes reminder just to draw your presentation to conclusion. So I have Eleanor Thomas, if you'd like to come forward, please. And yes, wherever you choose, Eleanor, one of the girls will switch on the microphone for you, please. And if you just like to remain rather than jump up and down, you can do your own presentation first and then your 2 representations on behalf of Deirdre Holding and Jean Johnson. So take your time, settle down, and when you're ready, and I will time you and remind you with 30 seconds to go when your first presentation is brought to a conclusion. Thank you.
I could put the stopwatch on my phone so I can just see them.
Yes, of course, that'd be fine, aye.
And just to make sure. Somebody said I could also hold up a photo as well, so I hope that's okay. Okay,
So, so give a start, yeah. 14 local residents, including every household near this site, and the CLOSEBURN Community Council all objected to this proposal. GILCHRISTLAND Farm is my home. We're a local family. My mum is from DUMFRIES. My sister and I came back to live here to provide our children with safe, sheltered upbringing in a beautiful rural environment where they could play freely outside. Show you. Here they are yesterday, playing in the snow. That's the barn, the proposed site. That's the building they use as a playhouse. Here they are last summer in the same place. We have 4 young children, all under 6. They're currently learning how to ride bicycles on the drive, our drive. The planning officer mentioned the extent of the concrete area outside the barn. Actually, half of that area is our drive, over which the applicant doesn't have any right of way. It's a small area which they do have access into the forecourt, but it's not the entire concrete area which you saw in those photographs. My son Theo, only 9 months old, has already been hospitalised once with a chest infection, diagnosed with pre-asthmatic symptoms and given an inhaler by our GP. Current evidence cites that children go on to develop asthma as a direct result of emissions from lorries and cars, particularly vintage ones, obviously. There's no way on earth they would have brought him to live yards away from a mechanic's garage or an industrial shed. When my sister and I both became single parents, we pooled resources and decided to take on a small farm in the hope of building a business where we could combine rearing young children with working from home. Currently, we are continuing the historic use of grazing hill sheep. We've already embarked on converting to organic. We're working with the Woodland Trust on a 5-year plan, which includes planting hedgerows, nut trees, and embracing agroforestry. We'll be keeping bees from this summer onwards, and I've applied for a grant to help us plant a wildflower meadow. Tawny and barn owls, swifts, buzzards, dozens of other birds, squirrels, hares, and bats all live on our farm. A crucial part of our plan was to diversify, to create an ecological farm stay, which will help us to support our kids. We have to ask, will anyone want to stay next to an industrial unit? The prospect of this barn, directly adjacent to our steading, being converted to industrial use has the potential to destroy everything we're working towards. The applicant's statement cites the council's own policy of bringing disused buildings back into use. This shed has lain empty in recent years because the current owner has decided not to use it. He owns all the land directly opposite the access track, as well as a large farm in Northamptonshire, I understand, and is a millionaire businessman. His land here is currently leased to a cattle and sheep local farmer, and of course the shed still has agricultural potential. It could be
30
used,
seconds to
it
go,
could be used
Eleanor.
for hay, straw, wool, and any of these things. Lastly, the barn was advertised as having a turning circle on that forecourt. They've now updated it to go through the shed, which I believe is not actually possible because the doors on the west side are too low for HGVs. Lastly, the principle of development mentions 2 conditions if a site is, would be acceptable if they offer opportunities to diversify an existing business or are related to site-specific resources or opportunity, and this proposal meets neither criteria. We ask, for the sake of our 4 children under 6, for their safety and good health, we ask you to turn down this application.
Thanks, Eleanor. Before you proceed with your presentation on behalf of your 2 friends or colleagues, are there any questions for Eleanor on the point she's raised regarding this application? Jane and then John Young.
If I can be quite clear, you're claiming that the turning circle is not capable of being implemented.
The original turning circle was shown to be outside the shed, and that can't be implemented because they don't have a right of way over half of that tarmac or concrete because it's actually our private drive. The entire drive is our private drive, and the right of way is only, I think it's something like 20 feet at one end. On the planning officer's original diagram, you can actually see, I think, there's a line, but the photographs are kind of misleading because they make you think it's a large area, and it's not. So the red box, that's what's owned by the applicant. If you can see, that only encompasses half of the concrete in the photographs. So the new turning circle is described as going through the building. The previous owner of that building has advised me, who's the CEO of Halo, advised me it's not possible for a large vehicle to do that because of the pitch of the roof and also because of the height of the side doors. You can't actually get a vehicle out of those, a large vehicle out of those doors. That's what I've been told. He said you couldn't, in fact, drive a large vehicle from one of the front doors to the other front door because of the way the roof is a double pitch.
Thanks, Jane. John Young.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Eleanor, for that presentation. You made the comment half the concrete area is our drive. Yes. Was that illustrated in the presentation we saw from the previously?
Well, I was just pointing out that in the photographs which showed the expanse, and the planning officer mentioned the extent of the concrete, but the photographs don't show you that. So, for example, where that concrete you can see there, half of that concrete is our private drive, which the applicant does not have the right to use. So the gate that you can see on the right-hand side, there's a line from the far post that goes directly to the end of where the end of the hedge, and that's so what's in the foreground is our private drive. If you can see, if you were to draw a line from the end of that green hedge along the front of the barns, everything on this side is not that anyone who's leasing that barn would have no right to use. So they can't have a turning circle in the front of the barn. Am I being clear? Sorry, I'm a bit nervous.
Thanks, John. Any other questions for Eleanor? Thank you, Eleanor. Well, the next two presentations you make, because they're in behalf of a third party, we won't ask you questions on them, okay, but we'll still ask you to confine your time to 3 minutes. So again, okay, if you want to do either Deirdre Holding or Jane Johnson first, whenever you're ready again, and I'll remind you with 30 seconds to go to draw your presentation to a conclusion.
Dr. Deirdre Holding can't be here herself because she's in hospital today. So, you ready for me to start? Yeah. I object to this application on several grounds. My main objection concerns the water supply. The supply for this agricultural building is taken from a private water supply which supplies 6 domestic properties and a few animal drinking troughs. The supply is already precarious at best. During the 16 years I've lived here, there have been numerous supply shortages during dry weather when the hill springs dry up. The supply is just about adequate for the current domestic and agricultural demand. Were an industrial concern to use significant amounts of water, it could have a seriously negative effect. The applicant states in their letter of 28th of October that it is also assumed that the volume of demand on the water network previously would have been significantly more than is now intended. We propose that the demand on the existing water and the drainage would be low and considerably less than required by the Halo Trust. They were the previous occupiers of that barn, although it's been empty for 5 years. This assumption is incorrect. The barns were used by Halo for storage of vehicles only. The building was never used for commercial purposes. Vehicles were never serviced nor maintained there. They were stored awaiting shipping. The CEO of Halo has confirmed where they were serviced. Indeed, when Halo applied for retrospective planning permission in 2015, it was for storage only. Notably, this was denied by the council at the time on the grounds the barn should be maintained for agricultural use only. Halo's CEO, Guy Willoughby, did recall on one occasion when a very dirty vehicle had to be pressure washed. The water supply to the cottages ran out completely, leaving the residents with only dirty, muddy water from the bottom of the header reservoir. The reservoir can take days or even weeks to refill, especially in drier weather. The water ablutions in the barn were in a porter cabin that came back from the Halo offices in Kosovo. They're hardly ever used at all. In fact, they were switched off for most of the time because they could have a leak could have occurred when they froze. No one would have noticed. Since then, the barn has been empty for over 5 years with a zero demand of water. The barns currently have no land area for soakaways or safe runoff. In summary, using the history of the barn's demand on the water supply during Halo's time as a justification that an industrial business operating 6 days a week will make no difference to the residents' water supply is entirely unrealistic and untested. Adding an industrial business to an already temperamental system could be catastrophic. My house is the highest of the 6 properties on the water supply, which means I dry up first. In the summer of 2018, which you might remember was very hot, local residents had a very reduced supply and I had no water for 5 days. I have very grave concerns. Of the 6 domestic properties, 1 has 4 small children, 2 have old pensioners, and who are both vulnerable groups for whom water supply could cause problems.
You have 30 seconds to go, Eleanor.
Whilst private water may be a civil and not a planning issue, it's a fundamental human right. The proposed plan could tip the balance and regularly leave residents with no water without warning. I therefore ask the Planning Committee to please turn down this application.
Thank you very much. We'll wait a minute or two to let you get breath back and have a sip of water, and then we'll have you do your final presentation. And again, just whenever you're comfortable.
I've got another couple of pictures to show you for this one, if that's okay. Okay, this is from Mrs. Jean Johnson. Are you ready? Yeah. My husband and I have lived at GILCHRISTLAND cottages next to the proposed site for 29 years. So that's their house. Any traffic going to GILCHRISTLAND barn would pass directly in front of our front door. From the C6 end, vehicles need to take a tight downhill turn onto a narrow, hilly, winding concrete drive. That's a photo from the other end of the drive. I don't know whether you can see. It sort of snakes down here. It's quite hilly. Really not very suitable for lorries. This drive is only 14 feet wide and unsuitable for any commercial traffic. There are no passing places, and as we are both disabled, it's important that daily carers and ambulances have unfettered access. The main road itself is not suitable for lorries. The applicant cites that it's frequently used for HGV lorries by forestry purposes. This is not correct. The approved forestry extraction route is via the wider road to A. Forestry transport down the C6N to the A76 is tightly restricted, and they put out signs whenever they have to turn lorries. Even so, in the last year, I have been stuck in the mud in a ditch on the side of the road twice after encountering a timber lorry and had to be lifted out with chains. There are insufficient passing places, deep ditches, a winding route, and it makes it impossible to reverse. 4 children with ponies from a local house, people on bicycles, walkers, dog walkers, and a primary school bus all use this road daily. Adding any additional traffic, let alone industrial vehicles or car transporters, is a genuine safety risk. The applicant argues the previous use of GILCHRISTLAND barn by the Halo Trust sets a precedent for industrial use. We were here for the entire time. Although vehicles did use the drives on the way to be stored, the barn was never used for maintenance or repairing vehicles. Most of the time we were entirely unaware of their existence, and it's not in any way comparable to the proposed use. Much emphasis is placed on the proposed tenant having a retirement hobby. I do not consider someone who is working 6 days a week to be retired, nor do I believe restoring vintage cars in a barn this size is a hobby. He is apparently intending to build a car transporter by himself. It makes no difference to me if his employees are also his friends and his family members. One Vincent Mazzulo is apparently the foremost Ferrari mechanic in the country. I think that may be a relative. To my mind, this is a fully working mechanic's garage or a vehicle repair workshop, which could be on our doorstep. My immediate neighbour's garden is 1 metre from the side of the barn. There's a photo there. The planning officer recommends to grant the change of use for this tenant only, with a caveat that the use would be of the scale and nature outlined in the proposal. Would it therefore be incumbent on the neighbouring residents to monitor use and report it if it exceeds the vague proposals? Is there any possibility the use would be revoked? Nevertheless, the precedent for future applicants and tenants, to my mind, would leave us open to building these for a whole variety of industrial uses.
You have 30 seconds to go, Eleanor.
It's been advertised, the barn's been advertised as having a septic tank. It has no septic tank of its own. It doesn't have permission to use ours, nor capacity. Lastly, we came to live here to enjoy a peaceful life in rural countryside. We're very concerned that an industrial business and the inevitable noise and air pollution would not only adversely affect our health and the ability to enjoy our own home, but impact the local wildlife. Hares, deer, buzzards, newts, and bats all live in the local houses. In fact, bats actually nest in this house here, which is next to the barn. We believe an industrial business is wholly unsuited to this site, set in the grounds of a farm, directly adjacent to people's homes. We ask the committee to turn down the application, please.
Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you very much for your presentation. Grateful to you, and if you'd like to resume your seat, thank you very much. We now come to the agent, Homer Young. If Homer would like to come forward, please. Homer, you'll have the same 3 minutes, and I'll remind you with 30 seconds to go just to drive presentation to a conclusion.
Okay, thank you.
You're ready, Homer.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, councillors. My name's Homer Young, and I'm the agent for the applicant. The alterations to the fabric and additions to GILCHRISTLAND store building were made by the Halo Trust when they took up occupancy in the year 2000 and have been designed for storage purposes. They include an internal office block, lockable storage containers, insulated roof cladding and insulated wall cladding. These changes are well suited for the intended use by the proposed tenant, but are not practical for most agricultural uses. The building in its current form does not lend itself to agricultural use due to the fact it's insulated and there's lack of ventilation for such a purpose. The building has been used in a loose commercial sense for approximately 15 to 20 years by the Halo Trust and has always been located in its current position adjacent to dwellings. During its use by the Halo Trust, a degree of noise and vehicle movements were fairly commonplace. The use intended by the proposed tenant will result in very limited movements and, given the insulation, very limited noise. Noise and fumes and traffic movements will be significantly less, in our opinion, than those resulting from the previous use. Currently, tractors and trailers use the access road without causing significant problems to cottages, and the proposed increase in very few LGVs per month will make little difference. The proposed tenant purchases older and vintage vehicles, including cars and lorries, to restore for his enjoyment, concentrating on about one vehicle per month. Once complete, the majority of the vehicles are retained for his own pleasure and stored within the building. The nature of the proposed activity is extremely low volume, and the tenant does not have a customer base, nor is it intended that any customers will visit the premises. One of the main concerns of the objectors was the impact on the public road network leading to the building. This is a public road and serves as access to the forest, and is frequently used by HGVs extracting timber from the said forest, including, within the last 2 weeks. I actually stay on this road, so I'm aware of the traffic movements. LDP2 policy ED2 states that the reuse of brownfield sites and buildings will be encouraged in favour of developing greenfield land, including prime quality agricultural land. It also states that the council will encourage the reuse of existing and disused buildings. The building in this application is a former agricultural building previously associated with GILCHRISTLAND estate. Most of the surrounding land has been sold by other parties, and the building is surplus to requirements for agricultural use. I mean, visibly, the building, takes the form of a commercial building rather than agricultural.
Your 30 seconds to go.
Okay, thank you. The applicant is investigating a number of possible uses for the presently redundant building. He's been very conscious of the impact that any change might have on the neighbours, and he's tried to identify a tenant that's going to cause minimal impact. He's been approached with several enterprises by his marketing agent, but he's turned these offers down because he didn't think they would be appropriate at this location. He believes the proposal put forward will not have a negative impact on the residential amenity, and asks the committee to support the application. Thank you.
Thanks, Homer. Would you just remain a minute, please, in case any members have questions for you? Ivor and then Carruthers.
There was reference, Mr. Young, to the turning circle.
Yes.
And how you would actually get a vehicle into the door and outside. But looking at that photo there, that looks like the runner for the door. At
yes.
the top, that's about eave height, so is the door the same height as the eaves?
On the front elevation, yes. Slightly lower on the side elevation. However, we're only proposing light goods vehicles, something, a small car transporter, something, pretty low in height. We're not envisaging any HGVs or large vehicles. And potentially, with a vehicle being so small, there is room to carry out maybe a 3-point turn within the concrete apron, under ownership of the applicant. Which wouldn't encroach on, there's almost a road going through the middle that's owned by GILCHRISTLAND House, although my client does have a legal right of access over that road to access this shed and agricultural sheds opposite.
Thanks, Homer. I'll get Ian Carruthers and then Ian Blake.
Partially answered, so I'll speak from, sorry if I'm back to you, Homer, in the first place, but so the turning circle, is it adequate? It's probably been answered. LGV or HGVs, it's been touched upon already, I think, in your presentation, but just need absolute clarity in that. And the traffic generation, the volumes and numbers. So what I'm trying to establish are the type of vehicles in comparison to what could potentially be there now. And the point is brought up, which has probably been covered, is, okay, it's been stated from one of the objectors that actually you cannot achieve this turning circle within the constraints that you've got in the land that you own. Could you just touch on them parts, if that's possible, please, just for clarification?
Yeah, sorry, we'd originally, previously supplied a plan showing a turning circle, but that encroached on the road that's seen going through the middle. We then revisited this, and there is potential. There's 2 roller shutter doors on the side of this building, on the front of this building. There's one on the side. You know, due to the small volume of traffic, there is potential to drive through the building out the side, back round. So you're entering the next in the site in a forward gear. So effectively, the turning circle is contained within the building. There's obviously on the left-hand side here, you know, there's an apron at the front that runs round the side. You know, for a small LG vehicle, it's obvious there that there is room to carry out a 3-point turn. You know, driving up the side, reversing back to the left-hand side, if you like, and then driving out the side in the forward gear.
I suppose I was really trying to establish as well that the volume of numbers that could potentially be had. So there's a number of traffic generation movements that could be achieved as it stands with its current permission compared to what the intention is from yourselves.
Sorry, I'm confused.
Okay.
Sorry.
So as it stands, there's a number of traffic traffic movements could be generated with the current permission. You're looking for a different use in regards to this. Is there an increase? Is what I'm looking for. If it is, by how much?
Sorry. We've no accurate figures on the level of volume of traffic, you know, of its previous tenant, you know, the Halo Trust. The Halo Trust, you know, has stored land clearance vehicles to be shipped abroad, etc. My assumption would be that these would have to be transported on HGVs rather than LGVs. So, you know, we propose that the vehicle movements proposed are significantly less, and certainly in size, than was previously used by the Halo Trust.
Ian Blake.
Sorry. Thank you, Chairman. The report mentions the fact that the development does not need a water supply or full drainage. You mentioned during your presentation that there were offices within the building. Is there a water connection just now?
Yes, there is. Yeah, and that was at the time of purchase by my client. You know, there was a water connection and a connection from the internal ablution block to the septic tank being referred to.
Jane Maitland.
Mr. Young, Class 5, in my understanding, is defined as being eligible to permit activities which are unsuitable to be carried out next to domestic properties for reason of noise and fumes, etc.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know why you need Class 5.
Quite simply, there's been a slight change with the conditions proposed by the case officer. We originally submitted a general Class 5 change of use application because it was mostly, you know, industrial and commercial inquiries that the client was getting. Since we submitted the application, tenants came forward that my client or my applicant deems suitable be at this site. So the Class 5 has kind of changed. The permission being sought now and the recommendation by the case officer is more a hobby use restricted to the prospective tenant alone. Therefore, the permission that we're seeking today isn't for a Class 5 permission.
Jane, I've got Jeff and then John Martin.
Yeah, could you tell me what the building of a car recovery vehicle actually involves? I'm also a little concerned about the definition of friends and family only. I mean, through social media, people have got thousands of friends nowadays, so what is the definition from your client of friends and family? And what does building a recovery vehicle actually involve?
I'm sorry, but, you know, I'm not a mechanic, but, you know, the prospective tenant has issued a statement or provided, you know, a breakdown in his business. He currently has a business in Derbyshire. It's for his own enjoyment. He buys up to, you know, a maximum of 3 ex-recovery vehicles, vintage cars, you know, per annum. In what condition, I'm not sure, you know, obviously they need work. He restores these, you know, retains them for his own personal collection, and occasionally sells them to generate, you know, a small income. I mean, this is a hobby-based business. This is someone that's...
Jeff?
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like the definition of a car recovery vehicle.
Sorry?
That doesn't sound like the definition of a car recovery vehicle. My impression of a car recovery vehicle is a vehicle which recovers cars. It's a loader type.
Yes, that's what he specialises in, restoration of old recovery vehicles. There's a statement that he's provided, that lists his business use and what he does at the moment.
Right, Jeff. John Martin.
No, it's just on the issue of the septic tank. I see there's a civil dispute going forward at the moment. Is there anything happened to that?
It's been investigated by my applicant's legal team at the moment. However, what I would say is that should that become an issue, there are alternative arrangements that can be made for sewage disposal on the site.
Sorry, I forgot to ask this. You mentioned insulation, and you suggest that because of the current level of insulation, there would be very little noise. Could you possibly elaborate as to what you've got in there that makes it particularly suitable to be Class 5?
There's blockwork walls to say mid-wall height. There's insulated wall and roof panels, which not only provide thermal protection, they also, protect against noise impact on adjacent properties, retaining noise within the building.
Any other questions for the agent? Homer, thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you
you'd
very
like
much.
to resume your seat. We're now in session, members. Can I remind you that civil matters don't come into any consideration that we have? That includes the turning circle. Jane Maitland.
Well, Chairman, I draw your attention to that photograph there. Look at what we're looking at. A shed next to a domestic property, and on the other side as well. And I have to say that my instinct here is that I think we would be setting up neighbourhood disputes, and that's not what this is about. What physical planning is about. We must be really careful about what we do. I'd be interested to hear what other people have to say, but I'm not convinced that this application actually complies with our policies.
Okay, Ian Carruthers.
I suppose I'm looking for advice in regards to, we've heard a number of concerns being raised, so we're classing them as civil matters, which they maybe are, but we've got, I think, a doctor, a GP saying that, okay, in the summertime, extra use in regards to the local water supply here, which is private supply, will have an impact on their amenity, their privilege, you could say, to water. Just in material, need clear advice. Is that a material consideration for us? Because it is an environmental issue, ultimately. Septic tanks and wastewater disposals may be somewhat different, but the drinking water is absolutely essential.
I will ask David to remind us where our responsibilities and duties are, because we cannot make planning decisions based on civil matters. David.
There's really two issues which have been mentioned here, which I would certainly urge some caution on. We need to be satisfied that there is the potential for the property to be serviced and for its requirements, and the indications are it can be. As to the private water supply and who has rights to use that, that is a civil matter. We can't get involved in that. As the agent correctly said, if they cannot establish that they have a legal right to go into the septic tank, which appears to be the existing situation, then they have alternatives, which would be to put in another private septic tank for themselves, or a Clargester system or something like that, which would address that. It's not part of this application, but if the private legal side of things show that they can't do that, then they would have to take that forward. But that side of it, really, the potential for it to be serviced has been established enough for us to be able to support it. The other one is the issue of the turning circle and things like that. You can clearly see from the photo that's on the slide there is enough physical room for that. As to whether or not there's a right of access or a prescribed right of access, that's again a legal matter which we can't get involved in as a planning authority. But we can see there's sufficient space on the land to get vehicles in and out of the overall site.
I've got Ian, Blake, Ivor Hislop and Jim McComb.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate what David said there, but paragraph 411 states that if the tenant requires a water supply, we already know they have that water supply just now, and the report also mentions, or there have been several mentions of the fact that at times the water supply is insufficient for its needs already with the domestic properties around. So I think that causes an issue.
Thanks for that, Ian. Ivor?
Chair, I don't think the water supply is a big issue for me, because currently you could take the cladding off, put 50 cattle in there, and they'll be drinking water all day, and they'll drink more water than what a domestic garage would use. However, condition 1 causes me concern, that we're going with a letter that's been supplied by Mr. Mazzullo. Now, 2 reasons it causes me concern. One, there was a domestic garage built in the house next to my mother's. This was for hobbies and things. It was the height of that building, the cranes for lifting engines and blocks and stuff. And it was just there to do the odd wee neighbour or friend, whatever. And the guy had his own job, and every night he was in that garage fixing cars for 2 or 3 folk. So how you restrict that to that, I don't know. The other one is, my daughter got Netflix. Now, this will sound funny, but there's a thing called Rust Valley Restorers. It's a program from, I think it's Canada. Might be worth going and having a look at that program before you consider any of these in the future. Because you go there, and the guy's got a field about 20 acres. Every inch of that is covered with all cars that he buys to do up. He puts them in a thing, and he'll bring one in, and the way he makes money is he does it up to restores it back and then sells it on. Now, that's got about 3 or 4 workers. They're working on it full time. They've got deadlines to meet. And if he's just doing this as a hobby, 1 a month, and he needs to pay money, because it's not a cheap thing getting spare parts for old vehicles, I'd be concerned about that first condition. I think you need to be a bit stronger in there of what can actually happen here. Because you could be in there actually running this hobby business and putting 3 or 4 cars through there a month, and then doing services, doing whatever. Because, some of us have a lot of friends. Maybe me being a Tory, I don't hate many, but I've got some. So you could have a lot of folk in there. Oh, I'm a pal. I'm just doing to blow my tyres up or whatever. So I'd like to see something stronger in condition 1.
If we get to the stage of considering approving this application, I'm sure you'll have your say at that stage, Ivor. We've got Jim McComb and then Jeff Lever and then Henry McLean.
Thanks, Chair. Currently, this building could be used for the storage of agricultural foodstuffs, fertilisers and chemicals, which in all likelihood would involve considerable vehicle movements. The application here, it states at the top, it is for Class 5, a Class 5 industrial building. And I would tend to agree with Ivor that the condition 1 is not sufficiently strong to specify the hours of use, the movements, etc. Now, that may well be a fault in the classification system, that it may not appropriately cover hobby use of the building, and that is a matter of concern.
Yeah, and we'll cover that at the end. The only thing I would remind you is that if we apply conditions, they have to be fair and reasonable, and they also have to be enforceable. And we wouldn't want to develop a situation where our enforcement officers would appear in there every week if we had granted a permission that just wasn't appropriate and reasonable. Wait, I've got Jeff. Jeff, and then...
First of all, just for clarification, at 5.1, condition 1, planning permission shall only, should that be endure? Is there actually a word endure which has some meaning?
No, it should be inure, actually. That is, inure is correct. That's the legal term for last, basically. It will last for his benefit only.
Okay, and the second
You learn
point-
something every day, Jeff.
I thought it was just the spell checker wasn't working. And I must admit, I've got serious concerns about granting Class 5 for a building in such close proximity to residential properties without having full control about what's going to actually happen within this building, and indeed what could happen outside the building. So, I mean, you know, I've seen quite a lot of garages, and the idea that everything's going to be done within the enclosed building, I think, is cloud cuckoo land. You know, it's bound to spill out. Those doors are bound to open during the summer, etc. So the chance of generating a great deal of noise and nuisance, I think, is a very real one. And in terms of who's going to actually be using this, I agree with Ivor. You know, I've seen quite close to where my daughter lives, near Airdrie, there's a building similar to what Ivor was referring to, where the field is full of cars waiting to be restored, and some of these are never going to be restored, etc. So I don't think we'd have any control over what this building's used for.
Okay, I've got Henry and then John Young, and then we'll try and bring this to a conclusion.
Thank you, Chair. Just wondering, could the case officer bring the plan back up, please, that was before the pictures? Yeah, that one there, thanks. Just bear with me a sec. I'm slightly curious. I'd like to understand if those turning circles have been ratified as standard, and if they are standard, what size of vehicle they represent, because I'm picking up at condition 2 that there's a bit of uncertainty as to the validity of the turning circles because there's a condition being imposed. Now, I think I would just like clarity from the case officer that those turning circles are deemed as standard and acceptable.
Sorry, Lindsay. Go on.
Yes, the turning circle has been clarified with the roads officer. The condition 2 is purely to ensure that that turning circle is provided and that it is thereafter retained for the lifetime of the development. That's for a light goods vehicle. So not an HGV, not a rigid or an articulated, it's a light goods vehicle.
So is that something like 7.5 tonne?
I'm not entirely sure about the technical side of it, but I'd say a light goods vehicle and would be of a van or up to, if you're suggesting 7.5 tonnes.
Thanks, Lindsay. My interpretation would be it was something like an RAC or AA recovery vehicle or something like that. That's the kind of thing that I imagine it would be. John Young, and then we'll try and get...
Right, thank you, Chair. Previous planning history on page 38. Certificate of lawfulness for existing use of building for storage and repair of vehicles refused. I wondered if I could have an explanation of that previous refusal.
David?
Personally, I wasn't actually involved in it, but a certificate of lawfulness, the onus is on the applicant to demonstrate a continuous use for at least 10 years of something which has actually been in breach of planning permission. So in other words, they would have to have given us clear evidence that the use had been continuous as a general industrial use for that 10-year period. And basically there was a historical letter, as I understand it, which went back to whenever it was, August 1999, which would then kind of negate that, saying that it wasn't being used for anything. Its existing use was agricultural. So basically, as I understand it, it was refused on the basis they weren't able to satisfactorily demonstrate that use had been continuous for the 10-year period that's necessary for us to issue a certificate. I don't know if Lindsay has anything else to add to that, or is that correct?
Nothing to add, Lindsay, no. Okay, on that basis, members, can we first of all find out what condition 1 might appear like? or do you simply want to go to whether or no we want to approve or refuse the application and then determine the conditions later on if we decide to approve it? I'm in your hands. Councillor Maitland, Councillor Dryburgh.
Well, my instinct, Chairman, is that this should be refused. I would like to suggest that it's contrary to our policies. Contrary to policy ED2, because it neither diversifies an existing business nor is it related to a site-specific requirement, resource or opportunity. There is nothing has been advanced as to why this should be actually here. So I'd like to suggest that that's contrary to our own policies, in addition to which a general industrial use class 5, by definition, is inappropriate in a domestic setting, and that is very close to domestic properties because it is likely to result in a significant adverse effect on residential amenity as a result of noise, vibration, odour, fumes and other emissions, and would therefore be unacceptable and contrary to the terms of LDP policy OP1. And I would like to suggest that that is the case here.
Thank you. Councillor Blake.
I'd like to second them.
Okay. Any alternative views? In that case, it's the unanimous decision of this committee that the application be refused on the following grounds. You just confirm the grounds of refusal, please, Tracy.
Thanks, Chair. The members have agreed to refuse the application on the grounds that it's contrary to policy ED10, ED2. The existing business on the site for existing resource, and that class 5 is inappropriate in a domestic setting, and this would have an adverse effect on residential amenity and would be contrary to OP1. OP1A.
Thank you, members. Given the time and given that the next agenda item is likely to be fairly lengthy, I think we should maybe have a comfort break or a recess. It's 25 past 12, go back at 5 to 1, 12:55. Thank you very much, members, and look forward to seeing you in the afternoon. For your indulgence, we move on to agenda item number 6. Land southwest of Glenhowan off the U114N Offshore Road, CAERLAVEROCK Estate. Planning application for change of use of agricultural land for the siting of 2 bespoke cabin structures for use as tourist accommodation. Formation of access, track and parking areas, installation of roof and ground mounted solar PV panels, and shared septic tank and soakaway. Case reference 19/1295/full. The application type is a full application. The recommendation is to approve subject conditions, and the case officer again is Lindsay Cameron. Lindsay, again, just take us through your presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. The application site for this particular application is located on land forming part of CAERLAVEROCK Estate. It lies to the south-east of the U114 public road, approximately 180 metres south-west of the small building group of Glenhowan and 2.2 kilometres south-east of Glencaple. The public road which would serve the development is that which also provides access to the Canine Rescue Centre. The application site comprises agricultural grazing land and 2 small areas of woodland. This is the proposed site plan for the development, which shows the 2 cabins together with the proposed access track and parking areas. The curved cabin is shown set back into the small area of woodland adjacent to the public road at the north end of the site, and the second cabin, the tree house, would be sited approximately 210 metres from the road towards the southern end of the other area of woodland. Vehicular access to the second cabin would be by way of a new access track which would be run from the access onto the public road along the line of the existing field boundary to point at the northern end of the second area of woodland, where a parking area for 1 car would be provided. Access to the treehouse cabin from there would then be on foot via a path through the woodland. This is a more detailed site plan for the curved cabin, which would be sited within the small area of woodland adjacent to the public road at the northern end of the site. It shows the cabin, the proposed parking and turning area, and the relationship to the surrounding trees. The two proposed cabin structures would both be prefabricated and of bespoke contemporary design. The first is this one, which is of curved design, which would be finished in black stained or charred timber cladding and would be fitted with double glazed windows, roof mounted solar PV panels. And this slide shows the proposed north and south elevations. This slide then shows the east and west elevations. And then we move on to the proposed floor plan for the curved unit. Moving on to the treehouse, this is a more detailed site plan showing where it would be sited approximately 210 metres from the public road towards the second area of woodland. It shows the cabin, the proposed ground-mounted solar PV panels, and again the relationship to the surrounding trees. This second cabin is called the treehouse, and it's an irregular shaped structure which would be elevated above the ground on galvanised steel columns and be finished in untreated larch cladding. And this is the proposed northeast elevation. And this is the southeast elevation. And finally, the southwest elevation. And again, we have the floor plan for the treehouse. Moving on to the photographs, this first photograph is taken from a point just southwest of the existing informal lay-by on the public road and the point of the proposed access. And the site for the curved cabin and its parking area would be located within the woodland to the right of the centre of photograph. Moving into the field, this photo is taken looking in a southwesterly direction towards the site for the curved cabin, which would be in the woodland roughly in the centre of the photograph. This is a closer view of the site for the curved cabin, again, which would be just located to the right of centre. The two small semi-mature hawthorns would be the only trees which would require to be removed as part of the application. Moving further into the site, this photograph is taken from the field boundary where the proposed access track would be located. It looks back in a northerly direction to the proposed access on the site for the curved unit. Turning to look in a southeasterly direction, this is a view along the line of the proposed access track, which would follow the existing field boundary, then return to meet the area of woodland in the centre of the photograph. This is a closer view of the second area of woodland where the treehouse cabin would be sited. The access track would continue along the field boundary in front of in the photograph and return to meet the woodland where the parking area for a single car would be located. And in order to provide a degree of screening for the car parking area, a hedge would be planted which would extend between the area of woodland towards the existing field boundary to the right of the photograph. This final photograph looks northeast into the area of woodland where the treehouse cabin would be sited within a small natural clearing, and only one dead tree would require to be removed in this area. The proposal is considered to comply with the provisions of the development plan, and it's recommended that the application be approved subject to the conditions set out in the report.
Thank you, Lindsay. Members, questions for the case officer? Ivor.
Chair, are these permanent structures that we're putting in? And if so, why aren't we looking at the application as housing in the countryside?
Lindsay?
The pods would be permanently sited, but the proposal is for holiday accommodation, and therefore the application has been considered under the relevant policy for tourist accommodation.
Ivor?
Chair, I had an application in my ward which was for 2 holiday accommodation lets. They were brick built, I'll give you that, but they were for holiday accommodation. They were dealt with under housing in the countryside and not under tourism. What's the difference between 2 houses and 2 pods? They're both permanent structures.
Councillor, will I get David to answer that? David.
Well, I don't really want to get involved in some application I don't know the background to, but certainly this one is under the revised policy on revised policy on tourist developments in LDP2. It is appropriate that this be viewed as that, because it's specifically for that purpose, and you'll note that the conditions are very much tying it to that use.
Any other questions for the case officer? In that case, we have a number of speakers, although we have one lady speaking for herself and then reading two statements. So if Shirley Little would like to come forward, please. Shirley, just take a seat. There's a little button on the bottom right hand of the console that should switch on your microphone. It'll come red, that's you. You will have 3 minutes to speak, and then if you would, I'll remind you 30 seconds to go. If you then wait in case any members have questions for you, that'd be great. And then your two presentations, one at a time. You won't be asked questions on it, but you have the same 3 minute opportunity. So whenever you're ready, Shirley.
I'd like to show you 4 photographs, all taken from the U114N, which will give an indication of how prominent these units will be in the landscape. However, I would suggest that only a visit to the location can actually fully do justice to the beauty of this place. Photograph 1, if I could have it. This shows the isolated copse of trees set against the estuary and its reflected light. This is a significant, striking feature within the landscape and contributes to its quality. The 5.5 metre mock-high treehouse will be set against these trees to the left of the copse, just out of camera shot here. But I think it shows how sparse this is. Obviously, this has been taken at the dormant time of the year, but that constitutes 6 months of the year. Next photograph, please. This is a view towards the site of the curved unit. It clearly shows how sparse the narrow strip of trees is and what poor screening it will afford, particularly during the dormant period. And the next one. This is looking south from the lay-by to show the view across the estuary, unfortunately taken on a cloudy day, or you would be looking at a magnificent view of Criffle. And to the south of the lay-by, you're looking across the Solway estuary to the Lake District Hills. Again. And this picture shows clearly the view from the U114N coming towards the lay-by where the curved unit will be sited. The unit will be sited towards the right of this photograph, where you can see the 2 small hawthorn trees that will be removed. There's no other cover there to hide this unit, and any covering planting will take a long time to actually hide it from anybody. It will be completely dominant in this site and out of place. The U114N may just be a U road, but it is by no means an unused road. It's popular with both locals and visitors and is used by many walkers, cyclists and horse riders.
You have 30 seconds to go, Shirley.
All of these people will be confronted by these completely unmissable alien structures, particularly in the unit at the lay-by. To deny this proposal will not prevent the applicant from pursuing other less sensitive sites within their 5,000-acre Carlaverock estate. However, to approve it will deny many local people and visitors the pleasure of the current unspoilt nature of the location and its unparalleled views. Please refuse this application as being contrary to policies ED9, NE2 and NE1, and by virtue of its adverse impact on both the landscape and scenic value of the national scenic area. For the sake of the undeveloped countryside throughout the region, please think carefully before going down this route.
Thank you, Shirley. Does any member have any questions for Shirley on her presentation? Okay, when you're comfortable, Shirley, do your first letter or speech on behalf of either William Litter or Roger Guy, and then I'll give you just a minute or two to compose yourself and then do the second one, please. And there'll be no questions this time because you're simply speaking on behalf of someone else.
This is a letter of objection on behalf of William Little. There are extremely important policy issues which have been highlighted by the 11 objectors to this application. I do not believe these concerns have been adequately addressed, nor has sufficient weight been given to the location within the National Scenic Area, and in particular to the importance and sensitive nature of this elevated site. This is not a discrete or out-of-sight location, nor is it a situation like the one recently approved at the Glen, which was for some closely grouped small units, well screened and within an existing building group and close to the applicant's dwelling house. Approval for this application will present the real danger of proliferation of units at the location and others throughout the National Scenic Area. Approval will provide real precedent for our other two National Scenic Areas and also the wider open countryside of Dumfries and Galloway. There is no evidence presented as to how this proposal will complement the natural landscape. On the contrary, this 2-storey high mock tree house and long, mainly glass-fronted lodge will be alien and incongruous in the landscape. The application before you does not meet the requirements of policy ED9 and will jeopardise the scenic landscape, which is valued by both residents and tourists. The Council, as planning authority, has long accepted the national planning guidance that within these areas of great landscape value there should be, quote, strong presumption against development within designated areas except where it was plainly necessary in connection with existing development. Dumfries and Galloway Council Local Plan Technical Papers 2014 and 2018. The proposal will have an adverse impact on the landscape character and scenic interest, and the applicant has failed to demonstrate that there is a specific need for the development at this location, which could not be met at a less sensitive location within their 5,000-acre landholding. This is therefore contrary to policy NE2, regional scenic areas, and also policy NE1, which is specifically there to protect our national scenic areas and which stipulates that any adverse effects of a proposal must clearly be outweighed by benefits which are of national importance. In conclusion, please consider these issues not just for this location but for the wider area. Simply put, if this application is approved within this field, which is within a national scenic area, then in which field in Dumfries and Galloway would such an application be refused? Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. There's water to hand if you need some water, or a minute, and if...
I'll just grab my water bottle.
Okay. And then just when you feel ready, there's no rush, just carry on.
This statement is on behalf of Mr. Roger Guy. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I apologise for not being here in person. The report before you this morning is deficient in several respects. It omits any reference to two policy issues and is weak in an important aspect of its assessment. The summary of objections received omits any mention of two significant matters to which I referred in my representation. Firstly, this application is for business development in the rural area. Policy ED2 covers this issue, but the policy is not referred to at all in the report. The policy is clear. Proposals will be encouraged to locate within or immediately adjacent to local centres, villages or small building groups, or where a traditional building is being reused. The proposed site for this development clearly does not comply with any of these types of location. Secondly, my representation made a number of points regarding damage to the integrity of the National Scenic Area. This integrity is a key element of the protection afforded by Scottish national and local planning policy. However, the summary of the objections received omits important elements in my submission, the establishment of precedent and proliferation. In addition, the report itself is completely silent on the precedent that approval of this application would set. While the absolute scale of the development may not be large, It is the consequences of approval that threaten the integrity of the National Scenic Area. There are currently no such developments of this nature within the Nith Estuary National Scenic Area. Based on the premise in the report, there would be no defence against future similar applications, even ones with a design, like this proposal, entirely alien to the built environment of the locality, which is contrary to policy OP2. The consequence would be a proliferation of scattered developments in open field locations wherever there was some scrub woodland or modest mitigation measures were offered. Was that really the intention when the local development plan was formulated? Finally, the report is overgenerous in its assessment of the mitigating effect which would be achieved by the proposed planting. The main species proposed are oak, hawthorn and holly, all of which are slow growing and will only make large bushes unless they are surrounded by other densely planted, faster growing species. Planting within existing woodland is rarely successful in terms of the new trees achieving their potential. In short, in the short to medium term, there will be no beneficial effect, and in the long term, there is likely to be little gain. The assessment in the report of screening effect, particularly in winter, of the existing scrub woodland is overstated. To sum up, if the above aspects are fully and properly taken into account, a different conclusion to that in the report should be reached. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Shirley, and thank you for taking the time to come forward and make these representations. If you'd like to retake your seat, I'd be grateful. We now have Gordon Kerr and Sam Booth, jointly the applicant and agent. Gentlemen, you will have 3 minutes between you, and I'll remind you with 30 seconds to go, just to draw your presentation to a conclusion, and whenever you're ready, gentlemen.
Great. Thank you, Chairman and members. I'm Gordon Kerr, Property Manager for the applicant and the wider CAERLAVEROCK estate. The central ethos of CAERLAVEROCK estate is conservation, which is symbolised by their affinity and association with the Wildfowl and Wetland Trust and the National Nature Reserve, which have been a valued part of the estate for 40 and 60 years, respectively. And as such, we're very sensitive to the environment within which we are seeking to bring people and reconnecting them with nature in a small-scale off-grid experience, whilst encouraging them to spend time at the Wetlands Trust, CAERLAVEROCK Castle, and on the National Nature Reserve, and indeed to visit Glencaple, in which will provide economic support to the independent businesses presently there, including the Nith Hotel, Vintage on the Nith, and the Boathouse, the latter of which is an estate venture in which we've made significant investment recently and also provide employment for 20 locals. The cabins are a small-scale project seeking to boost tourism within the local area in the right way, both sensitively and sustainably, whilst providing additional jobs for the community. We put much thought and consideration into the location of the two cabins, choosing the land to the southwest of Glenhowan with regard to it being a suitable distance from existing dwellings, the existing road access and lay-by, and it being equidistant from the aforementioned natural and historical visitor attractions and the businesses of Glencaple. We've ensured that both of the proposed cabins will not obstruct views of local residents, nor anyone stopping at the lay-by to enjoy their view, as can be seen from the site overlays that were displayed earlier. They're set into the woodland setting, and we are committed to the planting of the trees to provide additional screening to ensure the cabins are hidden from the road. And if I could refer to the photographs 1, 2 and 3 of the supporting information to the application, you will see that the woodland cover is in fact substantial and not as displayed in an earlier photograph of an objector. If I could now hand over to Sam Booth, who is the designer of the cabins and our agent for this proposal.
Yeah, my name is Sam Booth. We are the designers, but also in this case will be, if the project is successful, the manufacturers of the buildings. It's important to point out, I think, that they are very small in scale, designed to be as sustainable as possible, and are also built off-site and delivered to site. So the issue of them being permanent structures is one that is very different from the bricks and mortar approach that was mentioned earlier. We have, we think, taken as much care as we can to make sure that these are as sensitive to the sites as they sit in. We make sure that each building we do is bespoke and suited to where it is.
You have 30 seconds to go, Sam.
Okay. Important to to stress the nature of or the importance of tourism in a rural environment, the amount of income that that brings in, but also the fact that these are being built locally and the amount of jobs that our company supports doing this sort of work. I think probably that's all we need to say at this stage.
Thank you, gentlemen. If you just remain in case members have questions for you, I'm grateful to you for coming forward. Gentlemen, ladies, gentlemen, any questions? Ivor?
It was Mr. Kerr said that the trees are different in different photos, but are they not deciduous trees? Therefore, they lose their leaves in winter, so they're both accurate reflections, but at different times of the year.
I agree that they are deciduous trees, and indeed they do shed throughout the winter. I think one of the photographs, maybe if we're able to go back in these photographs by a couple, that one there, that is taken on the eastern side of the site, so it's very much into the woodland setting in which the curved cabin would be set against, and that is not a view that would necessarily be seen from the public road because there is significant cover behind that. And just sorry, on the matter of trees as well, in terms of planting trees and screening, obviously that can be done in a variety of size of what are referred to as standard trees, and indeed standard trees can be of varying sizes up to indeed 6 feet, so they start as established trees.
Thank you, Ivor. Any other questions for the applicant and the agent? John, sorry, I knew John was wanting to speak. Sorry, John Campbell.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm kind of curious, the design of the tree house. It looks remarkably like Caerlaverock Castle in its design. But one of the points I wanted to raise was the distance apart from, both cabins. Was there a particular reason why they have to be so far apart?
It is in part because they then both are screened by their own spinneys of trees. You're right, it is taking Caerlaverock Castle as its starting point. And I think that was important. That's to stress the point that each thing that we do would be bespoke and to suit the site. And making that link to Caerlaverock was important to us. They are separate, and that's important both for the visitor experience, but also that they will be more hidden in that way. Where we had two close together, I think you could make a greater argument for them being.
Thanks, John. I've got John Young and then John Martin.
Thank you, Chair. You said that these two buildings would be off-grid. Are you relying solely on solar power and battery storage?
Yeah.
And you also said they'll be built locally. How local will they be built?
We build our factory or workshops are in CLOSEBURN near Castle Douglas. All of the people that work for me are local. We've trained them up from the last 7 years I've been working here. They're designed locally. We cannot guarantee that all the materials will be local, but we will endeavour to source as much as we can locally.
Thanks, John. John Martin.
Just wondering, were any sites looked at outside the national scenic area at the Caerlaverock estate? Have you got any sites out with that?
I was about to say, so the majority of the estate is within the National Scenic Area, and indeed, as mentioned by Sam there, to afford the visitor experience and indeed actually have people come and enjoy the area, then the siting and the view and the vista was certainly important in identifying the site, and hence this site was considered to be the best site for it, and also, as previously said, they're being tucked out of the way and not interrupting the views that people can continue to benefit and enjoy from.
Thanks, John. Any other questions? Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much for coming forward. If you'd like to resume your seats, members, we're in session. Archie, and then Ian Carruthers.
Chair, thanks very much for this, and it's more a process thing this than anything else. I am a little bit concerned about the building, but not concerned enough to put an objection in. And I think in this particular case, it would be useful for the committee to do a site visit on this to understand exactly the suggestions of the photographs that they were having there. I think it would. I've not got sufficient objection to the thing, but I just want to clarify a few issues with going to a site visit.
Okay, we have a proposal for a site visit, Ian Carruthers.
I was going to propose the exact same proposal that Archie just waited to without preempting what he'd said, but I think we'd gain a much greater understanding. There's been a number of what kind of impact these buildings would have in the National Scenic Area. We have had concerns raised with us at committee and away from committee as well, I think, via letters. Say, okay, this may well set a precedent that might become uncontrollable. I think we have to alleviate these types of concerns, and I'd very much support and second Archie's move for a site visit. I think it's very important that we do have that.
Okay, I have a proposal and a second for a site visit. John Martin.
Just in that, as I say, I probably will support the site visit, but as I say, as Ivor said, like, the slides there, you get two different views. It looked not too bad, the design of the buildings. It looked at the lodges, or the supposed house and stilts. It's a tree house. But as I say, they may look all right for 6 months of the year, but the other 6 months of the year, when you see it like that, I just think the design of them is absolutely awful.
Well, I would suppose if a site visit's agreed, we'll get it in the right season for seeing it at its worst. Are there any alternative views to a site visit? Okay, that's a unanimous agreement of the committee that there'll be a site visit. David, can you arrange that at the earliest opportunity, please? We have, Tracy, can you just advise the public what decision this is?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, the application has been deferred for a site visit to be arranged.
Members, we come to agenda item number 7. Site west of Murrayfield, Rockcliffe. Application for planning permission in principle for the erection of 3 dwelling houses. Case reference 19/1535/PIP. The recommendation is to approve subject to condition A and B, and the case officer is Judith Turnbull. Judith, when you're ready, will you take us through your presentation, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just before I start the presentation, there's a correction on page 72, paragraph 5.1 at the bottom of the page under recommended decision. In the second line, instead of agreement in respect of a commuted sum for open space provision, it should say agreement in respect of a commuted payment for education contributions. So open space provision should say education contribution. The recommendations on both the first page of the report and the agenda are correct. Moving on to a presentation. This is the location plan. The application site is in Rockcliffe and located to the south of the main road in part of what is currently an agricultural field. This is the existing site plan. The western boundary has been omitted from this, but you'll see it on the next slide. It's the topographical survey has been carried out slightly larger than the site, and the site slopes down from the top, the northeastern corner, gradually down throughout the site. This is the proposed site plan with an indicative layout. The site has a frontage of approximately 35 metres to the public road and a depth of just over 100 metres. The properties of Murrayfield with the flat and Scriel lie to the east of the site. The site stops short of the field boundary on the south. That's to give access to the gate, which is on that boundary, to the field further south. There would also be an intervening strip of land between the west of the site and Duntanlich, the house to the west. The top two are actually proposed sections with indicative. The first one is through Murrayfield and proposed house plot 1, and the second one down is through Scriel and proposed house and plot 3. The bottom two are just existing sections, the same sections but existing. Onto the photographs. This is approaching the site on the C23 public road, with the site on the left and Duntanlich further down the road This is panning left from the previous. That's sort of looking over the corner of the site, right down in where the field is. That's the site. The boundaries of Scriel and Murrayfield are to the left of that. This is a view north with the site on the right of that. This is taken from the corner of the field now down at the south of the site, looking north. Duntan, like the house you can see slightly to the left of the picture, and Murrayfield to the right in the distance, and the site would be in front of Murrayfield. This is panning right, giving you a view of the whole site. The public road's in behind the dike there, I've kind of marked it. And this one is just panning right again, looking sort of up over the southern boundary of the site. So in conclusion, the application is recommended for approval as detailed in the report, subject to successful completion of a legal agreement in respect of education contributions and conditions.
Thank you, Judith. Any questions for the case officer? None. Ian?
Yeah, just one. Could you remind me where the settlement, the 30 mile per hour speed limits are in relation to this site?
I'm not entirely sure, but if I had to say, I would say they were up at the top of the hill. Well, there are houses about 220 metres to the east, further up the road, because that's some of the houses I've referred to in my report. So I would say that's where the 30 mile an hour limit is. But I have to say, I don't actually know. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Judith. If there are no other questions for the case officer, we'll come and register speakers. The first speaker is David Fallis. David, like come forward, please. David is speaking on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Hogg. David, you will have the usual 3 minutes, and I'll remind you with 30 seconds to go. You draw your presentation to a conclusion. Just whenever you're ready, David.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors, for hearing me today. Our concern is that the proposed development, by its form, arrangement to the public road, and indeed the scale of it, differs from the standard norm of what is generally accepted as being appropriate infill development within villages, and indeed promotes, in the majority here, an in-depth and backland arrangement which a committee has considered many times in the past and been advised that such backland configurations of properties are not acceptable or appropriate layout of land, and accordingly refuse them. Those cases too are generally accompanied by supporting arguments saying that there are similar patterns of development in close proximity. And in those instances, you've been advised that as each case requires to be assessed on its own merits, then you should ignore what has gone before and consider the case only in accordance with the current relative policies you have. In this instance, the new proposal is being compared to properties constructed many years ago, and in the case of my clients during World War II, many things, particularly planning policies and processes, have changed greatly in that time, and it would be a retrograde step to now see it as being acceptable when everything else presented to you of late in the context of such a form of development has been strongly argued against and has been found to be wholly unacceptable. If, however, you are now going to ignore your current policies and established practices in respect to such backland configurations and deem it as now acceptable, as here, then you're also opening up the very real possibility that the remainder of this field will go the same way, and you'll end up with a development that, had it come in as a complete proposal, would never have been accepted, yet a substandard layout of land will have been foisted now upon the community. If this development is approved, how can you, with all credibility, turn round and refuse another similar application within the life of the new development plan and its supplementary guidance for something similar on the rest of the field when you have today confirmed that such a consideration is acceptable? We ask you to be careful. We ask you to carefully consider the implications from today's decisions. Plan, as it were, and the consequences from it going forward, really the real precedent it will be setting.
Right.
We maintain that the proposal, even if the plot next to the road were turned 90 degrees, does not fit well with the current policies and guidance in the local plan, and indeed is far removed from what is generally conceived and considered to be appropriate infill development in villages. Also within the report, a great sway has been placed upon the supporting statement and the relative form and size and scale of development shown, yet in the conditions that is not recognised and there is no tie back to it. The conditions are open, it's free for all whenever they come forward at a later date to put in any kind of development that they want. If the submissions that have been made have been so important in influencing this decision, then the plans submitted should be appropriately conditioned in any permission going forward. Thank you for the indulgence going over the time. I appreciate that.
Thanks for that, David. Do any members have any questions for David in relation to his presentation today? In that case, thanks very much for coming forward, David. Councillor David Stitz recorded as the next speaker, but he has a hospital appointment at 2 o'clock. He turned up at 10:30 this morning, has been waiting all day for the opportunity, and I'm disappointed he hasn't been able to wait and say what he had to say. So unfortunately, David Stitz can't represent his constituents now. So we're left with the next speakers, which are Hamish McClellan and John Murray, the applicant and agent. If you'd like to come forward, gentlemen, please. And again, collectively, you'll have 3 minutes, and I'll remind you with 30 seconds to go just to draw your presentation to a conclusion. If you'd wait, just in case there are questions, I'd be grateful. Make sure the red light's on, sir. At bottom.
Oh yeah, I've got it. I'm John Murray, I'm the agent. I've got Hamish McClellan with me. The site is clearly an infill site within an existing village. We don't want to go over more of what's been covered already in the design statement and the application drawings. We're fully comfortable how the planning committee report has been put together and the conclusions that it comes to. And we're here to make ourselves available for any questions that the members might have.
Very grateful to you for your brief presentation, gentlemen. And members, do any members have any questions for the applicant or agent? No? Well, thank you for coming forward, gentlemen. If you'd like to retake your seat, that'd be great. Members are in session. Ian?
To be honest, Chairman, looking at this, on the face of it, it looks okay to me. I hear the argument in regards to backland development. I don't really foresee it myself. We look at the size and scale in regards to the rest of the settlement in there. It goes down. Look at the sight lines. It looks okay to me, Chairman. I'm not adverse to this being approved.
Seconder? Or is it simply unanimous? Are there any alternative views to this? Ian?
I've got a little concern. Paragraph 4.7, it's referring about to open space. There's no doubt that this area is an open space, but the fact that we, as a council, in the development of the local development plan 2, we chose not to include a map for this area. So because of that, it's not a designated open space. So it kind of infers that we're not losing an open space, where physically there most definitely is an open space there. If that makes sense.
Mind you, it wasn't in local development 1 either, and there has been no opportunity to make representation when the local development plans were being brought forward. But that aside, I accept what you're saying, but we still have a decision to make based on the officer's recommendation and the information before us. Ivor?
Chair, I've no problem with the site, but I had a bit of a problem with the indicative layout. To me, if you go back to, was it 3 houses? And I realise that, to me, that brings more into a sort of an urban style, whereas the other houses you have are sort of more randomly spaced. Even with the, is it Skreel, the one that's at the bottom from Murrayfield, you know, although it could be deemed backland development, I suppose, it's not 3, 1, 2, 3 after the other, and I don't like the look of the 3 houses like that, but I don't know whether they could be conditioned some way when the actual detail comes in.
Well,
because it meets the criteria, because I think, you know, you're in between the houses and you're coming down as far as Screel, but just the way it's laid out, it looks a bit urban for the setting of what I've seen in the photographs.
yeah, we have two options. Either we can either place a condition or we can have the final plan brought back to us for consideration. Maybe Judith want to help with that, or David? David?
It's really just to draw attention of members to condition 2, where the only bit of, Mr. Fallis was actually recognising this as well, the only prescriptive bit that we've actually attached to that, because again we want to keep it quite loose, is to actually require that the topmost house be orientated so it fronts onto the road, which I think would be really required in that location. But I would agree that there's, if it's more random, it would reflect better the way that the settlement of Rockcliffe has organically grown up over time. But again, this is only an indicative plan. It's got no planning status whatsoever, and there's no condition saying it must be like this.
Content with that, Ivor? So we either delegate...
Hopefully the applicant heard the sort of concerns that have been raised.
Okay, fine. So in that case, we have an outstanding move that this be approved. If there are no alternative views, we will have this as a unanimous decision of the committee. Okay, Tracy, can you confirm the decision of the committee, please?
Actually, the members have agreed to approve the application subject to the successful completion of a Section 69 legal agreement in respect of a commuted payment for education contribution within 6 months of the date of the decision or any extended timescale as agreed by the appointed officer, and the conditions as detailed in the report.
Thanks, Tracy. We come to agenda item number 8, BOWHOUSES, TERREGLES, DUMFRIES. Planning application for formation of access and hard standing. Case reference 19/1762/full. This is a full application. Recommendation is to approve subject to conditions, and the case officer Jessica Taylor. Jessica, when you're ready, take us through your presentation, please.
Thank you. As we just said, this application is for the formation of access and a creation of a hard standing for 2 parking spaces. The site is outlined in red. The Memorial Hall, which is referred to in some of the representations, is located on the opposite side of the road, and then it's surrounded by residential properties. There's a closer view, which is just showing the access and then coming in. So what we've got is a hard surface for the access coming onto block paving for the 2 parking spaces. Just run through some photos. So we're just looking at the site. Longer distance view. You can see it's currently grass verge with overgrown vegetation. So now, and again, just showing the existing grass verge. This is just to give you a view of the listed building. So this is the rear of it and the side. And again, just looking through the village. And the application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions in the report.
Thank you, Jessica. Any questions for the case officer? In that case, we have one registered speaker, Jordan Nish, who's the applicant. Jordan, would you like to come forward, please? Make sure the microphone's switched on. That's it, Jordan. You'll have 3 minutes to address the committee. I'll remind you with 30 seconds to go just to draw your presentation to a conclusion. If you just wait in case any questions for you, I'd be grateful.
No worries, thank you. Basically, the main reason why we want the driveway is we don't have any off-road parking. There's a road to the side of the house, as you can see, but we don't own that road. It's actually privately owned. This road here is privately owned. The grass verge at the side's owned by someone else as well, so we can't get access outside. So I looked at the objections. On the front of the road, the main objection is the parking, but they actually park at the other side of the road. So the driveway really won't affect the parking spaces, I've actually got a van and a car as well, which would be on the road at all times, so it would actually be worse for the street parking wise. That's really all I've got to say, really.
Thanks very much for being so brief, Jordan. Any questions for Jordan? Okay, thanks very much, Jordan. Would you like to take your seat again, please? Members, we're in session. Approve? Unanimous?
Yeah.
John Campbell?
Yeah, happy to approve this, but I was wondering if could it be possible to put a condition on for the rainwater runoff, have a sort of permittable type, block paving or whatever, rather than having the standard block paving, because all that runoff would have to go somewhere and it'll probably end up on the road.
That would make some of that type of paving that allows the grass to come through, but still provides traction for the vehicles. Is that the kind you're talking about, John?
Yeah, maybe, I don't know if David or... Yeah, grasscrete or something like that, yeah. It's some kind of thing, but if you just put the standard block, concrete block paving, all that rainwater has to run off somewhere. And you're probably just taking away a good bit of grass that would take the rainwater. So
just confirm
can
the
you help
type
me with
of
that,
style we're
Jessica?
talking about, Jessica.
It will be grasscrete, which is the mesh and the grass can grow through. It would, for the access, would need to be a hard surface for the access to get a road opening permit, but then it could be reasonably under the policy HE1 have grasscrete instead of the pot paving.
Members content to support that approach? Okay with that condition? Tracy, can you just confirm the decision, please?
Thanks, Chairman. Members have agreed to approve the application subject to conditions, with an additional condition that the be grasscrete after the hard standing area access.
That's in right, Jessica? Okay, thank you very much, Tracy. Thanks, Jessica. Okay, we come to the last agenda item, which is land north-east of Old Toll House, Newbridge. Application for planning permission in principle for erection of 3 dwelling houses, 19/0376/PIP. This was taken to reporter and refused. Is that right, David?
Yes, Chair. Basically, it was one that was recommended for refusal, and the committee agreed with that. It was refused, and the reporter agreed with both of us.
Well done. Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your attendance today. Safe journey home.